offer consultant reviews on behalf of staff. James Hickey, the planning administrator from Calvin Giordano and Associates, will provide the background information on the project and all relevant details related to this request. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone. My name is James Hickey. I'm with Calvin Giordano Associates. Address is 1800 Eller Drive in Fort Lauderdale, and yes, I've been sworn.
Very good.
So, the applicant is proposing 28 residential units, along with 1,500 to 3,500 square feet of commercial space. The commercial space would be on the ground floor, and they're going from RM45 multiple family residence, 45 units to the acre, to PDI, which is planned development infill. And one of the requirements of planned development infill is to have that mixed use. So they're having the residential use as well as the commercial use on the first floor. The proposed development is subject to the Air Park Overlay District. They do have letters, I believe, that are in your backup. That letter does expire relatively soon, I believe in September, but the agent will talk about that. They do have an extension to 2020 for that as well. This item, of course, was brought to Planning and Zoning on December 20th, 2017. At that meeting, the Planning and Zoning Board unanimously recommended denial of the proposed rezoning. One of the main reasons and one of staff's major issues were the lack of mixed use. The mixed use that was there, they were proposing a BSO substation as well as some commercial kiosks and kind of self-serve type of things, which really doesn't meet the intent of that zoning district. And also the interaction with the park. And at that time, there was no discussion of any discussion about park improvements that would be done. They have made some changes to that, and we'll walk through that. There were a number of residents, and there's a number of residents here today, and I won't speak for them. I'll have them speak for themselves and let you all know what their concerns are. Since that time, the development has been slightly modified. They're increasing that mixed-use commercial square footage. We talked about that between 1,500 and 3,500 square feet. The height is actually being decreased 42 feet. So the original proposal was at 248 feet. That's what the Planning and Zoning Board saw and denied. The proposal in tonight, they're requesting just over 205 feet for the proposed height. The applicant is actually proposing a developer's agreement which contemplates the physical improvements for the park. That has actually gone through a number of city department reviews. I know Development Services looked at it, Parks and Recreation, Utilities, Public Works, and Engineering. There is a meeting to discuss that on Wednesday, July 17th with the Parks and Rec Advisory Board for them to review and forward their recommendation to you all. If this would move forward tonight, that would be brought as part of the second reading for the proposed ordinance. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions.
Very good. Just a quick question before we move to the applicant. So it went to the Planning and Zoning Board before, but it's been changed since then. So there's no requirement that it go back to the Planning and Zoning Board.
There's not a requirement. They can actually request to move forward to you all for your consideration without having to go back to the Planning and Zoning Board.
So, okay, because there has been some. I've seen some letters that have wondered why it wasn't going back to the Planning and Zoning Board. So the developer actually chose not to do that.
Correct. There's not a requirement that they go back. They could go back, but they've decided to move forward for your consideration.
Okay. If they prefer to go to Planning and Zoning, that's their choice. But if they choose not to, that's also their choice. Very good. Thank you. Does the applicant wish to make a presentation?
You can go from here. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Dodie Keith. Here with our development team representing the project. My address is 301 East Atlantic Boulevard with Keith and Associates, and I have been sworn along with the rest of our team members. So I just want to kind of lead off by saying we're so happy to be able to be here. There's been a lot of miscommunication and confusion, and we're really happy to be able to be here and have that conversation. I know we have a lot of folks interested in the project as well. One of the things we're really excited about is to be able to come here. We've spent a good part of since last year we really listened. to some of the concerns that came forward from P&Z members and residents and the communities and all the folks that we've been speaking to throughout on the project and within the area. And so we really think that some of the changes and things that have come forward through the process have really created a fabulous, unique, iconic project for Pompano Beach. So we're so excited here. I'm going to turn this over to Hope Calhoun and let her start to take us through the presentation, and we look forward to answering all your questions. So Hope, you want to take off?
Good evening. My name is Hope Calhoun. I am a land use attorney with the law firm of Danae Miskell and Backman. I have been sworn. Our office is 14 Southeast 14th Street. So, as already stated by staff, this project was presented to the Planning and Zoning Board in 2017. As you've already heard tonight, we have made some substantial changes since then. Just as a way of reminder, this is a PDI rezoning. I know you all know that already. The application before you tonight is simply that. It's a rezoning. We know that a site plan or the site plan for any project is important when you're talking about rezoning. You always want to know as a commission, what is it that you're likely to see? Can you guys hear me? Is that my throat? That's better. That's better. Was that it was down here? I'm taller than I thought. So whenever a rezoning is done, you kind of like to know what's possible, what's probably going to come along with that. So for that reason, we're here before you again for you to consider the rezoning application. Any decision you make, obviously, you know this has to be based on the substantial competent evidence that we'll present tonight and meet the criteria as established by your city's code. One thing I will hand to your clerk at the end. I understand that the commissioners, perhaps city manager, I'm not sure who else, received some emails, perhaps of opposition, but for sure of support. In my hand, I hold 51 signatures, or signed letters rather, in support and in favor of our application. You know, it's summertime. It is sometimes difficult to get people to come to commission meetings when they're happy. So in light of that, we were able to get some signatures, and I believe we also do have some members of the public who are here to speak on our behalf. So very quickly, I'm just going to kind of run through the rezoning, and then again, I'm here tonight, as you've heard, with Dodie Keith, our engineering firm, Nino, our architect, and then you're going to hear from the public. Will start speaking also. I'm going to try to do both, and that's advance and talk. So again, you already know where the project is. You have the orientation. You know the address, 1508 North Ocean. This is a view of the site, the actual site itself, looking west from the east. You can see, again, we are the circled site, and around us already is what I would consider mid to actually high-rise residential. So what we're proposing in the site plan that eventually will come before you, again, you'll see it tonight, though, is consistent with what's around it. Consistency and compatibility is one of the things that you will evaluate with regard to the rezoning application. Again, just another view of the site. We already are familiar with the acreage, 0.621 acres. This is a northern view. You can see Tiffany Gardens close to us across 16th. I don't have a pointer, but there's a portion of that property that currently I think has cars parked on it that is vacant. And the zoning on that property currently allows for unlimited height. So it's not developed currently, but at some point in the future, it could be. And so, again, we're not proposing anything through our rezoning application, through our PDI, which has our development regulations proposed in it, that's inconsistent with what's around us. One more view, again, south. Just again, we're just trying to put you in the context of the site when you're not actually out there and you hear things and you read things that aren't necessarily factually accurate. You might get a different perspective. So we've shown you as many pictures as we can here to show you what's not just our parcel, but what is surrounding our parcel, because we think that it is very important to see the context. So again, as already stated, we have a request that's before you tonight is the rezoning petition. If it passes tonight, which I'm hoping it does, you will see a development agreement in the second reading for some voluntary things that we have agreed to do as a part of the ultimate development of this property. So again, I spoke very quickly, and I know you have this in your backup, and you've just actually reviewed a rezoning application, and I love that was approved unanimously. I hope we continue with that momentum. And so these are the criteria with regard to the rezoning application. Again, we have met and satisfied all of the criteria consistent with the land use designation and the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. And again, as you saw specifically through the contextual pictures that we sent, we are consistent with what's surrounding us. Our project architect will talk to you a little bit more about that, and you'll see that in additional graphics as we go forward. One of the interesting things and the thing to note about the PDI district is that the purpose is it's designed to create, number one, infill development for a small parcel. We're 0.62 acres. That's not so large. So the PDI was created for projects just like this. It's important to note that this is not the first time that this parcel has come before the city staff, perhaps not the city commission completely, but city staff, at least for development. I can tell you this particular client, my client in this particular case, came before the Planning and Zoning Board, submitted an application following the RM45 regulations, and that application had, I think we withdrew it before it actually made the hearing, but it had about 7 variances, and that just didn't make sense from a development perspective, right? That's why you have the PDI, and that's why this project, rather than go forward with that rezoning, those variances, we met with staff, we talked to staff and figured what would maybe be a better fit, and it was decided the PDI was, because again, as you can see in the purpose, it's designed for those infill sites. We're able to create some regulations that make sense and create a unique project for the area. This is kind of what I was talking about before. The picture on the left actually is not our prior project, but a project that was developed by a prior owner. I believe they previously got site plan approval for this. This was back in the early 2000s, I understand. And you can see, no offense to any architect who might be here or who designed this, I don't know who that was, but it's not the most exciting building, and it doesn't really create anything interesting in the area. What you're seeing on your right is the project that went before the Planning and Zoning Board, fully before the Planning and Zoning Board back in December of 2017. Again, we understood the concerns raised there, and as Mr. Hickey said in his presentation, the main objective raised there was the retail on the first floor. The board and the people that spoke and staff actually were concerned that one of the things proposed as a potential idea for the commercial component were kiosks and perhaps a Broward Sheriff's Office. We understood that probably wasn't the highest and best use for that space. We heard that, we understood that, we recognize that. So with that in mind, we've increased the retail space. We've already started talking to, I understand, some local businesses who would perhaps relocate to this area. So we're thinking perhaps a restaurant would do well here. They would be able to engage with not just the residents in the complex, but we would be able to engage with those people that want to use the beach. The other thing you just heard Mr. Hickey say was there was a concern or an issue raised about the interaction between the project and the beach itself and the park. So we have, in the new iteration that you will see, we've definitely addressed those concerns, and that's also addressed in the development agreement I referenced earlier, which I can talk to you a little bit more about. So I've kind of jumped ahead and told you what we're doing here, but what you're going to see through this particular PDI rezoning application is that, again, we've made some changes, and we're also very consistent with the plan development infill purpose and design, and that is we're creating a uniquely designed building. It is 19 stories. That is approximately 50 feet taller than our closest multifamily neighbor, and that is Tiffany Gardens. So 50 feet. When you think about it, when you're at that height, it's not even noticeable. When you've got a street in between you, 50 feet is really minuscule. And more importantly, we're talking about only 28 units. So that's fewer people, potential new residents in this development than are in this room tonight. 28 is a very small number. Again, in speaking with staff and understanding what we think we've understood or heard, some of the things the community has raised as an issue, again, you'll see it through their architect's presentation. We're offering a public art display adjacent to A1A, so that'll be a nice improvement there. Keep in mind, the property is vacant now. It has been vacant for some time. We believe it has been vacant because the regulations that are existing are very difficult to create a design and a building that's interesting and worthy of the city of Pompano Beach.
Again, we've already spoken about the ground level components and the commercial that, again, staff raised as an issue the first time. We've addressed that through as I said, we're going to incorporate an actual retail component, probably a restaurant. We have ground level parking. These are all site plan issues. But again, knowing that what you're going to want to see what's coming, we just thought we'd give you a little hint of what's to come through the site plan process. So the new proposal, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I think it's very important because, again, planning and zoning saw through the rezoning application a building that was a little bit different. The reason we've come before you as opposed to going back to planning and zoning is because, again, we made changes based on their comments, their recommendations, and what we've heard from the community. And we feel as though with the information we're providing you tonight, you will have enough information to make a decision on the rezoning application to determine whether or not it meets the code based on the evidence presented tonight. So again, one of the things staff just mentioned, Mr. Hickey just mentioned as an issue was interaction with the beach or the park. What you'll see through our new site design is there's beach access at 16th Street and A1A. That's what the graphic on the right kind of shows you. It's a little tease of what you'll see a little bit later in the presentation about the improvements we're making to the park area. Again, there's an entryway art plaza that you'll see as you're driving along A1A. And then we are, again, making the ground floor retail and interactive as opposed to the kiosks, which, again, staff indicated was an issue and not really speaking to the true desire and intent of a mixed-use project. The project before you, the rezoning application before you tonight, is truly a mixed-use project. Again, just the ground, this is more of a site plan level detail, but it is a part of the PDI, just the master concept plan. Obviously, the details of all the plans will be worked out through the site plan process, which goes through P&Z, and I believe you will see that also. And it just addresses access to the property, as well as, again, the interaction with the beach and the park adjacent to our property. So I've mentioned at least twice that we are, and I think Mr. Hickey also mentioned that we have a development agreement. We are in the process of finalizing that now, but it has been reviewed by your Parks and Rec Department, your Utilities Department, your City Attorney's Department, and I think a few others. And this list here, as you can see, is what we're proposing to provide in the park area as an amenity. And my eyesight is not that good, so I have to use my cheat sheet to read it to everyone because I don't know if you all can read that. So there's an existing pavilion in the park. We're looking to expand that pavilion to make it more user-friendly and provide more shade. There are restrooms currently in the park area, and what we're going to do, and all of this is in the development agreement, is we're going to create new restrooms, so they'll be better since they'll be newer. We're going to provide exterior showers as you come off of the beach and you maybe want to go into that restaurant. You might want to wash off your feet or wherever before you go in, so we're providing that shower amenity for you. Drinking fountains are also being provided, picnic tables, barbecue grills, trash receptacles, because we don't want people to make messes on the beach or on the park. Seating areas, there'll be still plenty of open space in the park area for people to utilize if they want to sit down and have a picnic, if they just want to enjoy the green grass that we will be planting. There will be landscaping, as I just said, irrigation, sidewalks. There'll be great connectivity. I'm not sure if we show it here. Great connectivity from A1A all the way through to the park and then to the beach ultimately. Bicycle racks, we are adding pedestrian lighting so that it's a place that's welcoming and inviting for those that want to use it. Park ID signage so you know where you are when you go to the park. And then interior signage so you know what's going on. I think I skipped over equipment is also being provided. We understand that people sometimes are outside and they want to use fitness machines. I think you have them at some of your other parks in the city. It might just be you're walking along and you want to do some quick pull-ups if you're strong enough to do so. So we'll provide medicine equipment such as that so that you can use it while you're walking along between the park, in the park, along the beach, wherever you're going. But again, we just want to make it very interactive and welcoming to the community, to the whole city, because as the city comes along, as residents rather in the city come along and want to use the park and access the park, they'll know it's not just for the residents of the proposed residential development. It's not just for those people that live right next door, but it's for everyone. The idea is for everyone in the city to feel like they have a piece of this park and they can utilize it. Again, this is just a simple graphic, I didn't do it, simple graphic illustration that kind of shows, again, what we're looking to do here in terms of park improvements. Having said that, I'd like to just make sure that I please reserve time for our team to respond to comments that may be heard tonight. I thank you for your time. I'm going to hand your clerk the petitions that I have, and then I'm going to turn it over to my architect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. My name is Arturo Griego. Everybody calls me Nino, with offices at 975 Arthur Godfrey Road, Suite 401, Miami Beach, Florida, 33140. As she mentioned, I'm the architect for the project, and first started on the project about 4 years ago, and been through quite a process. And as she mentioned, about a year and a half ago, we went through the P&Z with a lot of input prior to that, probably a little bit more since then. Our presentation today is a reflection of everything, everybody we met with, the neighborhood, the staff, my personal feeling, my personal research, my personal experience trying to redesign. So about a year ago, it was about the summer, this time last year probably, I was tasked with, hey, take a look at the project again and start over. It was not an easy thing to hear, but it was probably the thing needed at that time. They said, let's sit down, let's have a meeting, let's figure out what we can keep, because there's things that absolutely have to stay, or else there's no reason of doing a project here, and there's the rest that you go figure it out. And it was about that time last summer I started spending a lot of time over here, spending time on the beach, and went on vacation with my family, went to one of the most beautiful places on earth, Antelope Canyon over near Utah and Arizona, and saw a lot of things that were made by nature, basically. And I thought, how could you ever compete with something like this? Thinking of this project right after the mandate from the client saying, hey, go design something that is really spectacular, because that's what the site deserves. You know, the site has everything that you would want to do the highest end project that you can possibly do there, something aspirational. And that's where kind of everything started coming together for me, putting these goals together too. And it divided itself into two things: the building itself, and then the larger context, the neighborhood, the neighbors, and then for me that became bridging the gap between A1A and the beach as far as the greater site, and then the building itself. We all joke inside ourselves about the word I keep using is like, I need to make this thing Pompano-ish. I heard Pompanian today, I think, is a new one I've heard also, but I think that we've gotten to a place where at least we feel like we've been very thoughtful and very considerate of a lot of different things and a lot of moving parts to arrive where we're at. As Hope mentioned, all the technical aspects of the building. It's 28 units, and where we were before and where we are now, we've reduced. We've reduced height, we've reduced number of units, we've reduced footprint. I think we've taken the building's class, if you will, up a standard, which was almost a programmatic necessity based on the number of units, and how can we actually attract 28 people that can make this building a financial feasibility. Let me keep going before I go too long. For me, the key observation and really the inspiration came from those experiences at the beach and looking at the local community, and that includes the kite borders. It means the beach itself, the erosion, the sand, the resonance, the wind, everything that was there. Maybe look at the previous project and think, all right, there's a lot of things there that are not Pompano-ish, and it started with being more organic, and having that vacation in the back of my head and those natural forms. So as what you'll see is a progression of our design that really was inspired by many of those things. Those studies of wind, the studies of natural erosion on your beach here in Pompano, looking at the way we architects draw lines and saying, okay, how can we apply this to a building? It really came from things that were literally Pompano, sand, lines in the sand almost, and really feeling it and being it and wanting to actually live there myself. I love the area, the air park, the beach, the inlet, the golf course. I don't know what it doesn't have to make like a place that's, it's easy to get 28 people to move here from anywhere in the world, whether it's their first home, second home, or they're just moving south from Hillsborough Shores. It's an easy thing to imagine when all of those things are there in that place. So I think those things really kind of, when you're a designer, you start in a role, and that was the role for me, where I put all these things together and we just started really going through it. And then the balancing act of really putting all these things together. I feel like we got to a point that was working for everybody involved in the process. As Hope mentioned, the bigger idea was really not looking just at our site this time, but looking at the bigger picture. We had thought of that originally, and then this time we kind of really put our money where our mouth is and said, okay, let's look at the park, let's look how we can integrate it, but we keep things, sort of autonomous. So the park functions on itself. It must. It's a public park. It's a public amenity. It should be open to the public. It's a place where all Pompanians can come and have a birthday party, have a wedding. We've had discussions with the kite surfers. Their input on, we need a bigger pavilion so that we can actually have our summer camps and we can actually function there better than what we're doing now. Little places to get out of the shade, places to sit. I mean, these little nuances that actually make it local and functional for the people who are using it today, and then also for the people who are going to come in the future. And really, let's face it, the people who use the park are going to be majority, not the people who are living next door. For them, it's really like a visual amenity, I think. It's something nice to look at over compared to what's there today. And aside from recognizing that the PDI requires us to engage in building excellence, this is one of the areas that we're there. We talk about public benefit, and there's several of them, as you'll see throughout. On the ground level, we increased our retail. On the A1A side, it's going to be more of a service retail. I mean, it's early for that. We're not even at site plan. We're just at zoning right now. But on the park side, it definitely should be a service cafe, we all feel. And they've engaged conversation with people to make that happen.
It's Mount Vernon.
That's a good way to be a good neighbor and for your neighbor to take care of itself. And having eyes on the street, primary SIPTED principle. I mean, we did as much as we can there. And then increasing parking count. We have today 6 parking spaces parallel on there. Our plan proposes 15 plus 3.
I'm purposely recording this one thing, so I had to walk in the other.
And then another in the building itself, another 15 in the building, public parking spaces. That does not include the 75 that we have reserved for the residents. We have 75 parking spaces, 28 units. We have 15 public parking spaces in the building and 15 that we're providing on the street. The way that we're doing that on the street is by dedicating land. So I talk about the connection going across from A1A to the beach, basically.
Maybe he's getting his spot, yeah.
We moved our building east to provide a little more relief on the busiest part of the site, which is A1A. By moving the building east and shrinking the footprint, we're creating a plaza on that side.
I'm trying to listen to this because it's...
That side of the building is also going to provide a space for a public art installation. Hope that will be a competition of some sort. And have community engagement, and just another fun thing to bring to the site, I think.
I can't wait to find Andrea going, yes.
You'll see in these diagrams they're parallel, and they're also 90-degree parking, which is continuing the pattern that's there right now along the beach side, along the park side. And then to make that technically possible, we have to dedicate about 5 feet of our property to the public to make that work. So if approved and if moving forward in terms of design, DRC and AAC and all the other,
Who I was on the phone with was...
all the other processes that we have to go through,
What?
we would like to have this
About as easy as you understand that.
common pattern or Pompano pattern that goes from A1A to the beach. So it's recognizable. I've been on that street many times. We took drone videos, we took photographs, we just sat there in our cars. I see how people get to the beach right now. And this is the main place where people go to the beach. It's not at all ideal. You're crossing that street, which has no traffic calming whatsoever. Once you get across, they're still in the street because there's no sidewalk today, basically on 16th Street. And then you get to the park side, and it kind of gets a little bit easier. But people carrying all that stuff and all that distance from the intercoastal to the beach is not ideal. And if we can make that a part of this project, we definitely want to. It's again, I keep using the word public benefit. Those are the things that we're trying to.
That are associated with aspirin use, in particular if you fall and hit your head, that becomes a bigger liability. This is one of those things that we're going to do a longevity tier list, intermittent fasting.
So here's the thing with intermittent fasting. There is a whole movement out there that tries to make the case that time-restricted eating and or intermittent fasting has health benefits. That's not the case unless you also calorically restrict.
Exercise, but specifically cardio.
This is my belief, right, that maintaining muscle mass as you age is critically important. Also, obviously, maintaining cardiovascular fitness. I mean, if I had to rank them, I would actually put cardio a little bit below resistance training.
Genetic testing?
I think it's important. I think I put it in.
All right, Matt, so we've got a fun episode for you today. So we're going to do a longevity tier list. So on the internet, tier lists are pretty popular. I watch like watch ones or car
Don't
tier
believe
lists.
anything you hear on the internet.
True. Yeah, so including this. So this longevity tier list, I've got 26 different things to throw at you.
Okay.
We'll spend maybe a few minutes on each one. We'll rank them from A being the highest to F being the lowest. And I'll break down what each one of those means. I kind of want to give a disclaimer that this is just your professional opinion.
As always.
Yep, it's kind of fun. And that for each item, we'll kind of be asking how important is this for achieving, optimal health span for most people.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right, so let me break down what each letter means. I used to be a professor, so I'm sure you're familiar with the A, B, C, D. So A, an essential part of pretty much everyone interested in improving their health span and lifespan.
Okay.
B, important part of most people's health span routine. C, may need more research. Only put effort in this category if A and B are already taken care of. D, not worth most people's time or money, but not harmful. F is not helpful, potentially harmful, not worth your time or money. And TBD is just to be determined. It's kind of like one where we can put things that you're just not quite ready to rank. So.
Okay, I think I've got it.
All right, so starting with regular dental visits. So I got this guy here just to show you how it works. And I can take it and then drag it anywhere.
Yeah. All right.
I'll put a C.
So first of all, I don't like rules, so I'm going to break the rules.
Okay.
But I would put this along with oral care as essential. So I guess that's an A.
All right. So regular dental visit. So how would you describe that? Maybe like twice every 6 months.
I would put that as just oral care, right? Taking care of your teeth is essential.
Okay. So this other one here would be actually like flossing and brushing.
Yeah. Right. Do you
Maybe
absolutely
routine.
have to go to the dentist? Maybe a few people don't, but that's going to be part of, I would say, complete oral care approach.
Great. Sounds good.
Okay.
So dental visits maybe once, twice a year. Regular dental and flossing, or brushing and flossing.
And I'm a big believer in flossing. I just have to say from my own personal experience that's had a huge difference. So
Are you good at it? Do you have a good habit of doing it?
yeah, I do it every time I brush my teeth. Right? Again, this is just getting into the habit. It's funny because when I go to the dentist and they ask, "Do you floss?" I'm like, "Yeah, every time I brush my teeth." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's just a habit." So it's a good habit to get into.
The morning and night, especially.
Yes, most days. Yes.
So are they asking you that because it looks like you don't floss from there?
No, because they're surprised. It seems like most of their patients, if they floss, they do it once a day, as if it's like this big chore, and it's not. Just get in the habit.
For sure, like most things. All right, next up, we got DEXA scans. I'll put it here.
DEXA scans, I would. So what's the difference between B and C again? B is.
So let's go. So B is important part of most people's health span routine. C is maybe more research. Only put effort here. A and B are already taken care of.
So I'm going to put that in like a B- category for right now. I think it is an important part for most people. Probably not the most important, but it's certainly something I think that most people should do.
Okay, and that might change as it becomes more affordable and more.
Well, I think it's more available. Affordability, I mean, again, if you're in a city that has a body spec or a comparable provider, it's like $49, I think, $39 if you can get it, when they're having a special. So sure, maybe that's not affordable to everybody, but most people can afford $39 for their health.
So in this example, you give someone who's regular dental visits and flossing, and they want to allocate more time and energy into their longevity, then DEXA would be.
Yeah, I would say, right, in terms of like a relative importance, oral care is going to be above this assessment of body composition, in my view, yes.
Great, so next one, similar to DEXA, we have bioimpedance scales. So the example here is in-body, but could be other ones as well.
Yeah, and what's the, sorry, I'm going to have to keep asking
No
this.
worries.
What's the D definition again?
D is not worth most people's time or money, but not harmful.
Yeah, I'd probably put this in that category. I suppose knowing your body weight fluctuation, on a semi-regular basis is useful. It certainly is useful. Do you need an impedance scale to do that? Probably not.
So really just a scale would do the job for most people. Up next is fitness wearables. So maybe include Aura, include Apple, Fitbit.
Yeah, I think that's probably a C. I don't know that most people need it, but it's a super valuable tool. Again, I can't remember the exact definition for C. This is my own age-related cognitive decline. But
May need more research. Only put effort here. A and B are taken
I
care
think
of.
that's fair. I think it's it's a valuable tool to a lot of people. Is it essential? No. So let's leave it there for now. We maybe revisit it at the end.
All right, so the next one's a pretty broad category. It's just blood work in general.
Yeah, I put that in the A category. Like, I think you really need to know where your key biomarkers are, and it's something I wish that I had paid attention to earlier.
Yeah, great. So next we have multi cancer early detection testing.
Yeah, so this one, I guess I'd put it in like a B plus category or a B category. I think it's quite valuable and important. Is it essential? I guess it depends on whether you have cancer or not, but and whether the test is going to detect it. But I'd probably put it in that second tier down.
Okay, so these are pretty pricey, right? From what I know, like $1,000. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is kind of thing where like how.
So I didn't know economics were part of the rating scale.
Oh no, this is me just asking.
Yeah.
So how often would you recommend someone could afford you doing this somewhat regularly?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's worth saying there are multiple types of cancer detection, right? Cancer screening. So the picture is of the Grail Gallery test, which is what's called a liquid biopsy blood test for several different types of cancer. There is the more standard sort of breast cancer screening. There are whole body MRI. I think we can, for today, maybe lump those all together in cancer screening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, absolutely. Okay, so next one we have is epigenetic age testing. So the example is My DNA Age. There's a bunch of companies, I believe.
Yeah. What's the F category?
F is, let me go back real quick. I want to make sure.
F is like no evidence, maybe harmful. I guess I'd have to put this in the D category.
So not helpful, potentially harmful, not worth your time or money.
Well, based on the not worth your time, I don't know. I mean, again, I would say this is D minus F plus range. Like, I think these are useful research tools.
Yes.
I guess I'd put it in the D category. Okay. I think there's some value if it's done in the right way. I think the direct-to-consumer tests, I don't see much value there for most people.
Yeah. And not to influence too much, but this could be an example of something that's to be determined, which is need more research. Maybe as the science gets better, these tests might become more beneficial.
Sure, I think that's probably true.
We can leave it in D. That's fine. All right, next one is NMN.
I don't know, D or F. Somewhere down
there. Well,
F's
lonely down here. I don't know. We have our first F, or we can make it a D.
All right, let's put it in D for now.
All right. No F.
Again, I'm not saying there's no value to these things. I think the value is unproven, and I think with the NMN, there's the potential for harm. Maybe. So
yeah, depending. And if someone wanted to do NMN, I think you'd probably recommend plenty of testing before and after, if blood work and.
Yeah, so the thing with NMN is the concerns around kidney damage. And again, there's not a ton of data to support that. There's one study that has been presented at conferences from mice showing that mice getting NMN, aged mice getting NMN can develop kidney pathology. So, is that a one-off study? Is it the strain background? Is it only in mice? I don't know. I just know a lot of the science around the NAD precursors in general is pretty bad and hasn't been reproducible, and so I think that's clouding my skepticism. That's not exactly the right way to say it, but it's influencing my skepticism for the whole topic in general. Maybe I'm being overly negative on the NAD precursors, but I know too much of the questionable science, and so I'm not seeing anything that really convinces me that there's a lot of value for most people.
Well, why do you think it's so popular right now on social media and it's being talked about a lot?
I mean, I think it's been marketed well, and I think there are some, very charismatic people who have talked about it, and I think there are a lot of uninformed influencers who have parroted what they hear.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I think we have an F coming up soon. So the next one is reserve.
Actually, I'd probably put resveratrol. I mean, it's not so different from NMN. I think the science is a little bit even less convincing around resveratrol. Doesn't mean there's no benefit for certain people. I think it's clear resveratrol is not a longevity treatment, and so for longevity, yeah, I guess I'd put it in the F category.
Would there be a use case outside of longevity for someone?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some literature that resveratrol, at least in certain disease models in animals, can have some benefits. So, things like diet-induced obesity, there was a study in mice, some evidence in certain types of cardiovascular disease or metabolic disorder. The human data, again, is very mixed, and there are some reasons to believe that there are some negative side effects associated with resveratrol. So, again, at this point, I haven't seen anything that convinces me that certainly nothing to suggest it's going to move the needle for most people. It's most likely you're just going to pee it out, so probably not going to be harmful, but I think there is some evidence for negative effects as well. So I don't take it, and I wouldn't recommend it.
All right, so we have a full episode of that coming out soon, right? Resveratrol?
Yeah, we'll have a deep dive on at least the early data on resveratrol and from a longevity perspective in particular. Yeah.
Cool. So up next is rapamycin.
Yeah, rapamycin. I think I would probably put that. So the C category is only if you've got the other two dialed in. I think I'd probably put that in the C plus category.
Okay, so people really want to go to the next level.
Well, and it's not going to be for everybody, right? And I think this is part of what we are learning is who might benefit from rapamycin. Again, for people who've watched the podcast and the R files will probably recognize I am at least pretty convinced that the risk can be minimized, and there's the potential for pretty significant upside for some people. So yeah, I'd probably put it in the C category.
Do you have a minimum age that you'd recommend it to someone?
Well, again, I don't know that I would recommend it in general. I think it's a very individual question at this point. I don't see a lot of reason outside of people who may have very specific disorders for use of rapamycin in the context of potential health span benefits, before the age of 40 at this point.
Okay, so 40.
I just picked that out of thin air.
Yeah. It's kind of, the CMO here, he sort of made a comment of like, he wouldn't prescribe it to me. I wasn't asking for it, but just kind of curious.
Somebody your age. Yeah.
Maybe curious, where does that shift? It seems popular age is around 50 plus, though, from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think for off-label use, that's probably about the time when the physicians who are comfortable prescribing it start to become comfortable for their patients.
All right, so next up is D3.
Yeah, so I would say here, measuring and getting your D3 into, what we would consider the optimal range is an A, right? It's like any other essential or important nutrient, right? You want to optimize that as best you can.
Yeah. So here's something where like I've actually never tested my D3. I'm gonna do it with all the soon. But I've taken 5,000 IU for probably 5 years.
That's very common, and I get why. Again, I commented on this before. I think I understand the rationale there. It makes much more sense to measure because you can measure, and it's not that expensive to measure, and then if you need to supplement into the optimal range for two reasons. One, you might already be optimal. Not very many people in this part of the country are, but you might be. And so you could supplement yourself out of the optimal range. And two, there's no way to know if you are deficient, whether 5,000 a day or 5,000 every other day or whatever you're doing is enough to get you into the optimal range unless you measure it. So it makes much more sense to me to measure, then intervene, then measure again, and make sure you actually got where you wanted to be.
Okay.
That's not specific to vitamin D. That's a whole bunch of biomarkers, but that's a very obvious one.
Yeah, and they do it with like statins, for example, but they don't really do it. So D3 is also because it's fat, you can't have too much, I'm assuming, unlike vitamin C, which will just be out.
That's right, and it takes a while to show up in the blood test, right? So I don't know what the lag time is, but it's certainly on the order of weeks to a couple of months of supplementing before you'll see sort of where you equilibrate out. So, if you've been taking 5,000 a day for several months, then you're probably at sort of a steady state, whatever you measure. But if you just started, it won't show up on a blood test for a while.
Okay, it's a little bit delayed. All right, next up we have is genetic testing. So the example is 23andMe, but it could be other ones. I kind of put HOE in here as well.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think I put it in the A category. I think it's something that everybody should do, and there's a lot of valuable information there.
What I like about it is it's relatively inexpensive compared to like Grail, for example, and it's a one-time test.
I think the tests are inexpensive. Getting a quality interpretation is harder. Like 23andMe has really had to walk the line for what they tell people, right? They have been very careful not to give people a lot of useful information because they're worried about, legal complications that come from potentially practicing medicine, right? So yes, it is cheap to get done. It's not always easy to interpret the information that you get for the average person.
I saw you used to be able to download your raw data, and they recently turned that off because of their legal.
Yeah, I don't know any of the details there. I've heard that it's been harder for people to get their own data. I can't imagine that they are allowed to not give you your data because that is your data, right? I think they're required to. I think it is probably a temporary thing. And there are other companies out there that you can get your genotyping done through. So 23andMe is just the one that most people will have heard of. Ancestry has a genetic genotyping as well, and you can get your data from Ancestry.
Okay, nice. I haven't done that one. All right, so next up we have the first of our sort of 4 pillars, which is sleep.
Yeah, if it's a pillar, it goes in the A category.
Yeah.
No question about it.
I was sort of thinking a couple days ago of the analogy of eat, sleep, move, connect, each one being a leg on a bar stool. And if you pull out any, the bar stool falls over.
Yeah, I mean, they're connected for sure, right, with each other. So if you impact one, you're probably going to impact all of them.
Yeah, because here we'll talk a lot about, and we kind of like try to rank them as if you can. Each one's equally important.
Yeah.
Actually, next one is intermittent fasting, or time restricted feeding, that whole bucket.
Yeah, what's the difference between C and D again?
C is may need more research, only put effort here, and A and B are already taken care of, and D is not worth most people's time or money, but it's not harmful.
I mean, I don't even know that I would say that. So here's the thing with intermittent fasting, right? Like, I think it's a useful strategy for some people to maintain a healthy body weight, right? I also think for some people, and again, we should probably define intermittent fasting because it means different things to different people. But so intermittent fasting, I would define as fasting for at least 24 hours. Shrinking the window you eat into 8 or 12 or whatever I would call time restricted eating, right? So both of those, though, I think about very similarly in that they are both useful strategies for some people to maintain a healthy body weight. There is a whole movement out there that tries to make the case that time restricted eating and or intermittent fasting has health benefits beyond that. And the literature, in my view, at least in the animal studies, is pretty clear. That's not the case unless you also calorically restrict. So the benefits of intermittent fasting and time-restricted feeding have not been separated from the benefits of caloric restriction. And I have seen nothing to make me believe that there are benefits from either of those strategies beyond caloric restriction. Okay, so I just think that's important to appreciate. But I do believe there are some people where these are useful tools to help them maintain a healthy body weight. Is it essential? No. Is it beneficial for most people? I don't know. But are there any benefits beyond just a tool to maintain healthy body weight? I haven't seen any data. So yeah, I think more research needs to be done to establish whether or not there are benefits outside of that. Having said that, personally, I think there are better places to spend our research funds, and way too much money is being spent to study intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating, in my view. Is it a D or an F? I don't know. Could it be harmful? I think that's the question. Yes, I do believe that intermittent fasting can be harmful. I do believe that some people take it too far. It can cause psychological problems in some people. It can lean mass in some people if they're not taking steps to maintain lean mass. That's true for weight loss as well. So anyways, I don't know. I've gone on a little bit of a rant. Just because I get frustrated with how much bad information there is out there around intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating.
Okay, well, I'm going to put it D just because there's probably some people maybe who...
Resveratrol's awful when we're done.
Yeah, all right.
Well, leave it in D. We'll see what else.
I don't know if I ever told you, but before we connected, I read a popular longevity book, and I walked away thinking, like, I have to time restrict my feeding. So I went down to 1 hour eating window. There's 23 hours fasting, 1 meal a day.
That's almost what I would call intermittent fasting. Yeah, 1 meal a day is a variant of time restricted eating. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got down to, so I usually walk around 205. I was at like 185, and people were concerned.
Yeah.
Like I looked not great in terms of, because I lost mostly muscle.
Yeah, one of these days maybe I'll tell a story about a former grad student of mine who tried one meal a day, and it definitely has psychological effects in some people. But yeah, it can be, absolutely. It's very hard not to lose weight if you have been eating certainly if you've been eating a typical American diet, the standard American diet, SAD, SAD. It's very hard not to lose weight if you go to eating one meal a day. Can you cram in 3,000 calories in one meal? Sure, you could, but most people aren't going to do that, at least not every day. So the question is, are you eating a healthy diet, and what is the impact on your body composition while that's happening, and what are the psychological impacts? And I think it's complicated. It's going to be very individual, but in general, that is a caloric restriction paradigm, right? And so there are the effects that go along with caloric restriction. If you're losing weight, almost by definition, you are calorically deprived. You're in caloric imbalance, at least, right? And so that's a caloric restriction effect, and you may be able to achieve the same caloric restriction effect on weight in a more healthy way by using a different strategy to achieve caloric imbalance.
Like dietary restriction or counting your calories.
Dietary restriction is sort of a catch-all for all of these things, right? So yes, right. So tracking calories, maybe still eating whatever it is, 3 meals a day, but your total calories are still less than calories expended. Increasing exercise. There are all sorts of different strategies to achieve caloric imbalance that will cause you to lose weight. This is, I think, the thing that makes the time-restricted eating so compelling, or intermittent fasting, is it's easy conceptually for people to stick to. Yeah, I'm just going to eat one meal a day. I can eat whatever I want. I'm just going to eat one meal a day. I don't think that's a particularly healthy mindset, but that's an easy mindset for a lot of people to adopt.
I think for me, it turned eating into just like a light switch instead of a dimmer switch. So sort of easy, just like either eating or not.
Yeah.
And you end up with a small enough window, you end up being restricted.
But again, we've gone on for a while, but I just think it's really important for people to understand there is really no good evidence that there are benefits associated with either time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting beyond caloric restriction. There are clear benefits in certain contexts from caloric restriction. In longevity, lots and lots of animal studies showing you can increase lifespan, improve health span metrics. In people who are overweight or obese, lots of benefits that accrue when you get to a healthy weight. And the only way to do that is by being in caloric imbalance. And caloric restriction is the easiest way to achieve that. I think the question is are there any benefits to these strategies if you're not calorically restricted? And there is this perception that has been sort of, amplified by uninformed influencers that that's been shown, and it just hasn't. And that, I think, is where the disconnect is.
Like autophagy comes to mind. What people say.
So autophagy is a biological process that gets induced by inhibition of mTOR, and if you fast long enough, you will induce autophagy. I think and there's some reason to believe that's beneficial in certain contexts. The question, though, is if you intermittent fast long enough to induce autophagy, let's say you fast for 48 hours, but you don't caloric restrict, so you eat twice as much the next day, or is the detriment from doing that going to offset any benefits you might have gotten from autophagy? So is it the autophagy? Is it the caloric restriction? Is it the overall context that matters, right? And that's where I think there's this disconnect that, the idea that just increasing autophagy in and of itself, if everything else is equal, is going to give you some health benefit, that really hasn't been shown.
Okay. Well, just end on a good note, just me spending too much time as we're watching the YouTube videos of this world. Since the drop of Outlive by Peter T, I've noticed a shift away from IF a little bit.
Yeah, and Peter's interesting because he was big in fasting at one point, and now I think has moved at least a little bit away from it as a cure-all, right? Again, I think for certain people it can be a very powerful strategy. If somebody wants to, if they're overweight, they want to get to a healthy weight, and they want to try it, great, try it. I would just say pay attention to your diet quality, one. So don't go in with the idea that I can eat one meal a day or I can skip eating, 2 days a week, and then I can eat whatever I want. That's just dumb. So focus on diet quality. And then I would also say think about resistance training, or at least monitor your lean mass to make sure you aren't disproportionately losing lean mass while you're losing weight.
Great. All right. Next one is exercise, but specifically cardio.
So this is a little bit tricky, right? So, and I think the one after this is going to be resistance training, right? So, I mean, again, if I had to, and they're both important, obviously, I I guess I would say resistance training needs to go in the A category. This is my belief, right? That maintaining muscle mass as you age is critically important. Also, obviously, maintaining cardiovascular fitness is critically important. They probably should both be in the A category, I guess, but I mean, if I had to rank them, I would actually put cardio a little bit below resistance training, in part because if you do resistance training, you know, intensely enough, you will get a cardio benefit from it as well. But because I think that that's the place where most people fall down. We'll just put them both in the A category. This will avoid the cardio people getting all upset with me, I guess. But exercise obviously is an A. I think they're both important. I think resistance training or maintaining muscle mass does not get the attention that it deserves in the wellness community. And I should say, you don't have to lift weights to maintain muscle mass. There are other ways that you can maintain muscle mass with age. I just think that resistance training is the one that is easiest for most people to accomplish.
I know you personally love pull-ups, so that would be an
I have learned to love pull-ups. Yeah, I definitely was not a pull-up guy for most of my life.
Well, I'm gonna brag for you. So last week we did a VO2 max test, and right when he got off, took the mask off, he went into 20 pull-ups just to see if he could.
This is true. I did.
I guessed 10, and you were like, I'm gonna double that. The next one, I'm gonna give a little.
So we're gonna now get a bunch of people. We're gonna get a bunch of the pull-up, purists. Like, were they really pull-ups? Just go all the way up? Just go all the way down? Okay, well, maybe we'll do a video and we can put it out there. I did do 20 pull-ups. They probably weren't perfect, but you know what? They were good enough.
Yeah, and then actually a comment you made was maybe I didn't go hard enough on the video too.
That's true.
Okay, still. The next one I'm gonna give a little preamble is, I feel like in the health span sort of coaching, it's popular now to separate zone 2 cardio, zone 5 cardio, resistance training, like to work out via like energy systems, or to break them up by energy systems. So this one is cross training. So you think CrossFit, Orange Theory, combining a workout with cardio and strength at the same time.
Yeah, I'd probably put that in the C category. Like, if it works for you, great. Is it something that everybody needs to do? No, I don't think so.
Okay,
I think I think you just gotta figure out what works for you. But and again, this is an area where maybe I'll change my mind, as I learn more, as the research accumulates. But I haven't seen anything that convinces me that CrossFit per se is necessary to get the optimal benefits from exercise.
Okay, yeah. I can see a certain person maybe so busy they can't.
Yeah, like I said, if it works for you, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely, right.
But in general, it's better probably to separate those two.
I don't know if it's better. But I'm just saying I don't see anything that makes me think that per se is essential. Essentially, you're getting both the cardio and the resistance.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Next one, creatine monohydrate. This is actually the same brand I use.
Yeah, me too, by the way. I would put that in the B, probably. Yeah, I think I become a believer. Like, well, actually, what's the difference between B and C again? God, I'm doing terrible here.
So B.
I'm too worried about the actual definition you gave.
That's
so
important.
If we're ranking these things, I'm going to put it in B.
So B is an important part of most people's health span routine. C is may need more research. But only do this if A and B are taken care of.
Yeah, I guess I'd give it like a B minus. I think
Okay.
put it.
The B minus. That's a B. Okay. Yeah. So I used to work at DNC for a number of years, and my takeaway with creatine is just read the label. The only ingredient should be creatine monohydrate.
Yeah.
5 grams for most people. If you weigh a lot, maybe a little slightly more.
Yeah.
But, don't do not micronized is fine, but don't do all the weird ones. All right. Up next, we got it's kind of a pair. We'll put them together. So start with not smoking.
That's in the A category. There's no good reason to smoke.
No smoking.
I get it. I used to smoke. I get it.
I was about to ask. You did it?
I started when I was in probably 7th grade.
What?
And how old was I when I quit? Probably mid-20s. Yeah, probably. It was not too long after I met my wife, so I was probably like 24.
Did she have something to do with you stop smoking?
We decided to together. She smoked at the time too.
Oh, that's super interesting. That's new.
And I feel very fortunate. Like, I was not physically addicted, right? It was more just a psychological thing or habit. Right?
Yeah.
So I know for some people it's a physical addiction and really, really hard to quit it. I didn't find it difficult.
I have a feeling that your lungs are probably that now of a non-smoker because it's been so long. You kind of smoked in that small window.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely right. Certainly the data suggests that people can, mostly come back from smoking. Although the epidemiology does suggest there are some long-term risks. That's why sometimes you'll see like lifetime packs smoked or year packs smoked or whatever they use to estimate some of these risks. So I think it's an open question. Can you ever come fully back from the damage that you did from smoking? Probably most of the way, and I think some people probably can fully come back, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely less popular in my generation than I've noticed.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think this is one place where, America has done a pretty good job. We've done a really crappy job in a lot of areas of health, but yeah, I think smoking in particular is an area where the policies that were put in place have had a significant impact. When you go to other parts of the world, you still see a lot more smoking than you do here.
Okay. All right. So next one is not drinking. That you recently.
Yeah. So I would. This is hard, right? So I guess I wouldn't quite go to the extent of completely cutting alcohol out, but I think if we frame it as, moderate consumption of alcohol, and by that a pretty strict definition of moderate consumption of alcohol. So I think, if you look at the epidemiology, 1 drink a day, there are potentially some benefits associated with 1 drink of alcohol a day from an epidemiological perspective. But that's not, the big old American-sized wine glasses, right? We're talking like a real single alcoholic drink volume-wise. So I'm not, even though I pretty much have completely cut alcohol out, not completely, pretty much though. I maybe drink twice a month now, right? I used to drink every day.
Does it like 2 drinks a month? Does it mean like twice a month?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on the situation, but yeah, 2 or 3, right? I don't drink a lot when I drink, but I might have a beer at dinner if I'm out with friends or something like that. So I would say, I would actually say probably less than 1 drink a day is optimal. But if we kind of put some bounds on this idea of, not drinking every day, probably, but moderate consumption of alcohol, or moderate to none, I put in the A category. I'm not somebody who's going to say you should never drink. It's evil that for health. But
fair.
Yeah. But certainly overconsumption of alcohol is just as damaging, if not more damaging, than smoking.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard people mention like 2 drinks a week kind of being the max for what moderate is described as.
That seems pretty reasonable to me. Again, everybody's going to be a little bit different individual, but and I think this is actually an area where it's still a little bit unclear in terms of like optimal health span across the population. Is complete abstinence from alcohol better than moderate consumption of alcohol? I think it's an open question. If you look in the epidemiology, you can certainly make a case that moderate consumption of alcohol has some benefits in terms of all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease. So I think it's still an open case. That's partly why I'm not somebody who says you should completely abstain. I also think there's a social component for lots of people, and we know socialization and human connection is important as well.
Which is probably where the benefits come from, potentially.
Potentially, that's part of the story, yeah, absolutely.
They connect pillars for being with other people.
Yeah.
All right, up next we got CGMs, continuous glucose monitors.
Yeah, so I think I would probably put this in the B or C category. Like, it is something where, I put it in the B category. Like, I think it's something that's useful for most people, at least as a one-off, to learn about their own interaction with food and their own metabolic state.
Great. Yeah, we're going to be diving deep into that, I think this month or next month.
Yeah.
All right, so here we have microbiome analysis. This is a random company, I'm not sure of, but they do gut analysis.
Yeah. I'd put it in the D category. I mean, I have a hard time saying that the microbiome analysis is any better than the biological age test at this point.
I see.
I think a lot of the stuff where they do a microbiome analysis and then tell you to take some supplements is not very well scientifically supported. Honestly, I think, the microbiome stuff can be useful in the context of just sort of figuring out from a global perspective, what is the composition of your microbiome, and should you, take sort of global steps like increasing the amount of insoluble fiber in your diet, things like that. Again, for most people, you probably don't need a microbiome test to tell you that you should probably increase the amount of fiber in your diet by eating healthy fiber-rich vegetables, for example. I don't know. Again, this is an area that I think is a moving target. I feel like the science is farther ahead on the microbiome than on the biological aging clocks, but I'm not sure how much further ahead it is. I again, I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of people upset with me for saying that, but that's kind of where I'm at with the microbiome. I don't really buy into a lot of this, and the microbiome supplements, again, I don't know. Maybe it's a C, maybe, I don't know. Does the test really help you there? I don't know.
The supplements would be like prebiotics and probiotics, stuff like that. Okay. And also, just this tier list is in the.
Yeah, well, prebiotics, again, prebiotics you can just get through the diet, right, in the form of a high fiber diet, or adding things like, fiber supplements to your protein shake. We talked about this previously, right? Like inulin powder, chia seeds. Apparently I pronounced that funny, chia seeds, whatever. Those kinds of things, right? You can just add, and those act as prebiotics. The probiotics, right? Taking a microbiome supplement. Again, I think there's a lot of questions around even that marketplace. Like, how many of them actually have viable CFUs, right? So the quality, it comes into play also with the efficacy, because a lot of the stuff that's on the market may not have any efficacy because there's very little to no regulation in the manufacturing of these products.
And if they have to be stored a certain way, you're not sure how Amazon or whoever, how they store it.
Right.
So.
And also, I think, this is something most people don't realize. Again, I'm not really worried about this in the probiotic marketplace for most products, but, if you actually had a probiotic that worked well and changed the composition of your microbiome, that could have long-lasting effects that are unanticipated, right? And it's not so different than taking antibiotics. You take antibiotics, you wipe out your microbiome. We know that can have very long-lasting effects on people's metabolic state because you have changed the microbiome. And the same thing's true if you were to take a probiotic that actually had efficacy, dramatically remodeled your microbiome. We might think it's good given our current understanding of the microbiome, which is very rudimentary. We may not know what the long-term consequences of that are.
Yeah, so I took antibiotics for the first time 2 weeks ago when I had appendicitis.
Right.
And so the first time I ever had to think about this. So since then, I kind of upped my I guess it would be probiotics from diet, and then
Prebiotics.
So prebiotics from diet. My wife said I probably wasn't on it long enough for it to impact. I'm not sure how it works.
No, it would impact, absolutely. If you took, well, again, I don't know what to do, but most of the time, if you're on a course of antibiotics, it's enough to have an impact on your microbiome, and oftentimes it will dramatically change your gut microbiome. I guess that's another thing. We're using the term microbiome pretty sloppily, so we have been referring to the gut microbiome the whole time. There is, of course, the microbiome of your skin, the microbiome in your mouth. So there are multiple microbial communities in our body. Most of the time when people say microbiome, they mean the gut microbiome.
So similar to the DNA methylation test, it's sort of like to be determined, maybe the science will
Yeah, I totally believe that the microbiome is hugely important for health. I'm not at all suggesting that's not the case. And that our ability to measure the microbiome and intervene through the microbiome will improve. I'm just not sure it's ready for prime time yet.
All right, so moving on, we've got hormone replacement therapy, HRT, very popular right now.
Yeah, so again, I think we should probably, maybe we don't need to worry about male versus female. You can do hormone replacement therapy for women for menopause, right, is probably the most common form of hormone replacement therapy. Of course, there's also hormone replacement therapy in men for things like testosterone. So, again, it's going to be individual. I think that knowing your hormonal status and hormone replacement therapy, if it is appropriate given your situation, is in the A.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I think it's absolutely essential to understand your hormonal status, and has a huge impact on quality of life for you.
And we should say there's steps, like if you're low in testosterone or whatever might be, steps you would recommend before you go to HRT in terms of like permission to use
I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. I think that's very individual. And again, we're talking specifically men. If we're talking about testosterone, most likely. So in that case, I think the thing to consider is that for many men, if you go on testosterone replacement therapy, it is to some extent a one-way door, right? In other words, you very likely will reduce or completely shut off your body's ability to produce testosterone endogenously and probably sperm. That's not completely true. There are cases where young people have been able to come back and restore endogenous production of sperm and testosterone, but the risk is certainly there. So you need to be aware of that if you go on testosterone replacement therapy, there is a good chance if you want to maintain testosterone, you will need to be on that therapy for the rest of your life. So that's one thing to consider, and that's going to be an individual question. Do I want to do everything I possibly can before I take that step? You mentioned vitamin D. That's the other thing to consider is, are there potentially other things that you can fix that are leading to a hormonal imbalance? And I think absolutely everybody should look at that first under the care of their physician, right? So things like nutritional deficiencies, resistance training in some people can increase testosterone production. So things like that, yes, you should look and see, is there something other than the aging process, or, you know, something that's happening specifically in the pituitary or in your gonads that are driving the hormonal changes? Look at that first. Try to fix other potential causes before you go right to replacement therapy. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always had visualization of testosterone levels, for example, hormone levels, being sort of like a gauge where it's red, green, and then red again. And a lot of people are in the red for.
Are you talking about low,
low
medium, high?
Yeah, like I did 2 rounds of steroids in my early 20s, and I was in the high, also having negative effects. For a lot of people.
And how did you define those as negative effects?
Oh, like, well, man, my blood pressure, my cholesterol, my lipid panels.
Yeah.
What's funny is some of the effects are permanent, like if you have balding or gyno.
Right.
But the effects are the benefits, the good effects are temporary. So it's a really bad trade-off where pretty young, kind of
Yeah,
stupid
sure.
back then.
Yeah.
I would never do it now.
So look, I drank and smoked. You did steroids. Okay, you know, we all do dumb stuff when we're kids.
Yeah, so, but I do have 2 kids now, so I thankfully made a 2 10-week cycles probably a year apart, and it didn't affect anything long term.
Yeah, right. And I mean, again, I think everybody's situation is different. I think the question, though, in my mind is, especially with things like sex hormones, you know, it's not obvious where. So I would agree with you, right? Low, optimal, or normal, whatever those terms mean, right? I don't think we know how to measure optimal for lots of things. And then too high in these cases. I think it's not always obvious where that too high mark is. And I think with aging in particular, this is true for both men and women, there are some pretty substantial costs associated with sex hormone deficiencies, right? So again, we talked about lean mass, loss of lean mass, loss of bone density, loss of sexual function, depression, you know, all of these things, energy, right? And so I think, you know, it's pretty clear that for many people, once you get down in the suboptimally low range, there are a lot of benefits that accrue from replacement therapy. And I think for a long time, the risks were greatly overblown. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for this. There were some poorly interpreted, you know, human studies. There's been sort of the regulatory, I don't even know where this derives from, but this, you know, really strong regulatory component to sex hormones and villainization of these things, right? That I think the scare tactics have been employed in some cases where I actually don't know that there's a lot of evidence for negative side effects. Sure, if you push it really, really high, but in the context of replacement therapy, I'm not really convinced there's much in the way of negative side effects for most people. So I guess my view is that it's certainly something that everybody, I think, should get their hormones measured, probably starting in their 50s, at least once every few years. And I don't see a lot of downside to replacement therapy at this point if your biomarkers suggest that that's appropriate.
Yeah, as far as I know, you're not on HRT, right?
I've never taken testosterone, although we'll do an episode on it at some point, I'm sure. I have been sort of low testosterone, low normal to low testosterone for a couple of years, and I probably will at some point. But I'm also, you know, we talked about this recognition that it is to some extent a one-way door, and I want to try to do everything I can before I take that step of being on testosterone therapy for the rest of my life.
Okay. And so those things are just like the low-hanging fruit: diet, exercise. I even heard you in a different podcast. You mentioned avoiding microplastics, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know how. I mean, again, I don't. The microplastic stuff is still pretty new. The impact, certainly, they can have impacts on hormone levels. How strong that is. That I think it's a good idea to avoid the microplastics, regardless of where your testosterone is at. Like, I think there's all sorts of reasons why you probably want to do that.
Yeah, I just, at least with heated stuff, so like all my Tupperware is glass, my coffee cups are glass. So.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely moved away from plastic water bottles to stainless steel, and it makes sense.
All right, so we got a couple more. So this one is skin aging clock, and I tried it. I think the company's called Novo. So you take a photo of your face, and they have 2 million people that are in this algorithm. It gets 31 for me. I'm 32.
Yeah.
And it also gives you recommendations on like where you felt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any value to it unless it somehow motivates you to improve your lifestyle. Like, what are you going to do?
True. Yeah, good point.
Okay, this is what the algorithm says. First of all, does it mean anything? And then second, what are you going to do? I don't know.
That's a good point. It's actually
the D category or the F category. I don't know.
It's not really, I guess, that actionable. It's more of
could it harm you? Yeah, I guess it could harm you if it makes you anxious about your skin age.
Yeah, it would have told me.
It could also motivate you.
It was like, you don't have any wrinkles. That's great. It's like I scored like 8 out of 100, which is super low for porousness. You have a lot of pores. Like, what do I do about that? I don't know. All right, this is actually our last one here. It's a cognitive function test. So assessments to evaluate various aspects of cognitive abilities, memory, attention.
Yeah, again, I guess I'd kind of put this. I guess I'd put it in the B category. Although again, I'm not sure what you do about it, right? So if it motivates you to modify your lifestyle, then that's a good thing. If it creates anxiety, then that's a bad thing. So I tend to believe that information is power, right? That knowing the data is better than not knowing the data. I think for a lot of people, knowing the data creates anxiety. So maybe it depends on what kind of person you are. I don't know. Does that make it a C? I don't know.
Would it be a good candidate? Like, I know at early medical and TS practice, they have someone who this is all they do, and they do all the different tests, and it's pretty difficult to establish a baseline. And you might repeat the test every few years to see are they getting better or worse. Like, I think it's relatively hard to measure someone's trajectory towards Alzheimer's and dementia when they're 40s and 50s.
Well, I think there are emerging tests that can give you early predictions of dementia, right? So there are retinal imaging now that, again, these aren't quite ready for prime time, but it seems pretty clear that you can get predictions for dementia from retinal testing or brain MRI. All of these things, though, sort of fall in the category of what do you do if you find out that you are on the path to dementia, and again, maybe it's motivational, which is great. If that causes you to clean up your diet and exercise more and get better sleep, that's all good. If it creates anxiety or depression, that's bad. I mean, you could probably put genetic testing in this same category. So I kind of think wherever we stick this one, we kind of need to stick the genetic testing as well, right? Because it's the same thing. It's like, what do you do about it? Although in the case of the genetic testing, there are some genetic disorders where it's very clear what you do about it. There are some where it's not so clear what you do about it. So I don't know. I guess I don't know. A minus, B plus, somewhere in there for both of those. Yeah.
So kind of knowing if you have this, if you have a higher risk for Alzheimer's, it might make you want to keep your A1C low or to have a good metabolic health. Those things could be a multiplier.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there are lots of things you can do to lower your risk of dementia, right? But it's also the same things you would do to lower your risk for all sorts of other stuff. It's also the things you would do to slow your rate of biological aging, right?
Yeah.
So, eat a healthy diet, exercise regularly, get better sleep, focus on your human relationships, maybe get a dog, I don't know.
Yeah.
All of these things that are going to have a positive impact on your overall health status. So I don't know that there's anything right now, though, that we could recommend to people if they find out that they are performing poorly on a cognitive test that is specific to cognitive function beyond these sort of things that are going to overall affect health. I know there are some of these supplements that people think are beneficial for cognitive function. Again, maybe not at this point. Maybe it pushes the risk-reward ratio for certain individuals closer to reward for some of these supplements where it's less clear, but where they might have a specific benefit for brain function.
Okay, yeah, personally I have one ApoE gene, and I know I have a very long-lived family.
You mean the E4?
Yeah, one
variant. Yeah.
And I have a lot of people in my family very long-lived, 90 plus, and towards the end, 2 of them have gotten dementia, Alzheimer's, so it's relatively motivating. And someone I know who's pretty well known on YouTube, he's got 2 variants of the E4. Is that what it is, right?
Yeah.
And he is the healthiest person I know.
Yeah, again, I think for some people, he's very, very, very motivating. I think, there is certainly this school of thought.
Alcohol is a perfect example of one. You often hear that the blue zones, all except for Loma Linda, they all have a little tiny amount of alcohol on a regular basis. Now, can we infer that alcohol is good? Or is that population can handle it because the rest of their lifestyle is organized? We don't know yet, right? Or unless if you know.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I have something to say about alcohol, because I get asked this all the time. Dr. Lee, red wine's good for you, right? Well, now I just read that all wine is bad for you. And what I basically say when it comes to alcohol, because it's a triggering and somewhat controversial point. It is true that many epidemiological studies have shown that drinking a glass or 2, very moderate, red wine is associated with some beneficial health outcomes, lower risk of some diseases. But I will tell you that in no study, no research is alcohol, ethanol, okay, the stuff that's underlying, your whiskey, your beer, your wine. It's the alcohol is not actually good for you. Alcohol is a toxin, actually. And
So the starting point is exercise is the #1 factor for our longevity. Recently, you were asked, I think it was in the Q&A you guys published on your show, that a chap who's playing tennis twice a week and basketball twice a week, is that okay? I think your answer was, it's probably not optimal. To the person on the street, I believe if they heard that someone was playing tennis twice a week and basketball twice a week, they'd be thinking, wow, that guy's crushing it. So I wonder if that's a good way of explaining your model for exercise and why we need this broad approach to movement.
So maybe I'll explain what the centenarian decathlon is, and then I'll come back and your question's an interesting one. So the centenarian decathlon is a model that we use to anchor the marginal decade. So again, the marginal decade, last decade of your life. So what we want our patients to be able to do is identify, again, in great specificity, physically what they want to be able to do. And the physical manifestation of your marginal decade, we just describe as your centenarian decathlon. So you might have lots of goals in that marginal decade. They might, you should hopefully have some cognitive goals. Hopefully you have some emotional goals vis-a-vis relationships. But when it comes to the physical goals, we want you to be very specific, and we start by saying, look, we have a menu of options, and we want you at least be able to identify 10 that you want to be able to do. And again, these are very, very specific. And I think there are some of these that many people would have on their list, and there are others that are unique to individuals. So there's some that are on my list that most people wouldn't care for.
Like what would you say?
I'm sure most people wouldn't care that, I want to be able to pull a 50-pound bow back. I love archery, so, and currently I draw like a 75-pound bow, but I want to be able to still still draw a 50-pound compound bow. I still want to be able to drive a race car to within about 5% of how fast I can drive it today. Paul Newman, up until a few months before his death, was still driving at this, almost at his best times. So, those are some really kind of weird esoteric goals. But then I also have much more generic goals that I think make sense. Like I still would want to be able to walk up 5 flights of stairs uninterrupted. I want to be able to walk down 5 flights of stairs. Those are require very different types of strength and integrity of the musculature. I want to be able to get up off the floor. I want to be able to sit on the floor for 20 minutes, and I want to be able to get up on my own power. Again, how often do you see somebody in their 80s that can do that? It's very, very unusual. I want to be able to pick a child up out of a crib. I want to be able to pick a child up off the floor. So there are many of these other goals that I have. Now, how does one go about doing that? Well, again, I think if you are listening to this, scratching your head a bit, thinking, those sound really, really easy. How can those be goals? You probably haven't spent enough time around people in their 80s or 90s. Those are staggering physical feats. So let's think about what decathletes do. A decathlete is an athlete who performs 10 different activities, and the decathlete is not the best at any one of those activities, right? Like when it comes to the 110-meter hurdles or the 200-yard meter dash, they're not the fastest, but no one is faster at doing all 10 of the things that they do, which encompass both the track and field events. And they're generally regarded as the best athlete in the Olympics, and they train as a generalist, but with great specificity.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to apply the exact same model to ourselves as we prepare for those events. We have to be great generalists, so we have to have high peak cardiorespiratory fitness, wide aerobic base, high levels of strength, great amount of stability, all of these things. And we also, have to be able to train very specifically to achieve those things. So now let's go back to the question that you asked at the outset. So is playing tennis twice a week and basketball twice a week sufficient to prepare you to be the most robust 85-year-old? And I said, believe it or not, I don't think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Because as wonderful as those sports are, they don't cover all the bases that I just described. They're not building a very wide aerobic base, nor are they building a very high cardiorespiratory peak. Those are both very intermittent sports. Start, stop, start, stop. They're interval training, and that's great. Interval training is a very efficient way, if you had no other time, to get bits of both, the aerobic base, the anaerobic peak. But it's no substitute for having a really wide base and a really high peak. Also, they're not doing a lot for your strength directly. They're not doing a lot for your stability. In fact, they're challenging your stability. So if a person says, I love doing those things, I say, great, keep doing them. If a person says, I want to be able to do those things in my 80s, I say, great, I think that's doable. But you will need to train to ensure that you have the strength, stability, and the endurance to do those things well.
It's such a wonderful framework to look at aging, and I like this idea that you specifically get your patients to write down what are 10 things I want to be able to do in my marginal decades. I've heard you say once that a couple of people will say, I want to be heli skiing. Does that person in their 40s, let's say, really want to heli ski when they're 95? Or is heli skiing a way of saying, I want to be independent and be able to enjoy the mountains and nature? Whether they do or not, the point is, by you knowing that, by them articulating it, it means they can develop a specific program with you and your team to help them meet that.
Oh yeah, completely. And the other thing is, these things can be malleable. I mean, if you'd asked me this question 10 years ago, I don't know that there might not be many things that overlapped 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, I probably would have taken for granted so many things that I don't understand today, and they wouldn't have even made the list. And there would have been other activities in the list that aren't as high a priority to me today. So for example, now, in my marginal decade, I would be happy to swim, half a mile. I think that's one of my things, is to be able to swim half a mile in 20 minutes.
Where have you got that from?
Well, swimming used to be very important to me. So again, if you'd asked me this a decade ago, I probably would have wanted to have swum 10 miles, and I would have really over-indexed swimming and being able to swim really, really long distances. Whereas now swimming is much less important to me, so it's mostly just about being able to still enjoy the water.
Yeah.
And if it's swimming half a mile now, that would be sufficient. It's can I tread water? One of the things I have now is, can I get out of the pool on my own? Like, again, without a ladder. Could I push myself up on a pool deck and get out of the pool? So it's just less focused on the time in the water. But you're right. If you go after heli skiing, and when we have patients that say things like that, I mean, I'm not going to discourage somebody from that, but I'm also going to say, like, that's going to require an astronomical amount of strength. And you're going to have to be a lot stronger in 5 years than you are now to appropriately catch the glide rate down to where you're going to be at that point in time. And by the way, if you fall short, you're still going to be able to do a lot of great things.
Yeah.
But let's go for it.
Yeah. No, I love the approach. You bring a specificity to something that is otherwise vague. I just want to be well while I'm older. Well, what does well mean? Like, well for what?
Yeah, that's the thing we really try to get people to understand is no athlete, and you have to think of yourself as an athlete here, no athlete has ever achieved anything great without specificity. I mean, like, pick any athlete doing anything today that's exceptional. Do you think they're just out there willy-nilly going, you think Djokovic is like, it would be great to win Wimbledon.
I'll just play tennis each week.
I'll just play a little bit of tennis each week. I mean, no chance.
Yeah.
I mean, no chance. And again, like, we live in a world where sports science has made it really clear as to what it takes to achieve these physical things. So there shouldn't be any difference when you're thinking about the activities you want to be able to do in the final years of your life.
There's a real irony about that sports science, because if I think about humanity as a whole, on one hand, we're now seeing just incredible feats that we've never seen before. Let's say Kipchoge running a marathon in under 2 hours, something that was deemed physiologically impossible maybe 10, 15 years ago by certain people. It's not possible. The human body will self-implode or whatever, right? So he's shown that that's possible. We're seeing world records left, right, and centre going down. We're seeing Premier League footballers playing into their 40s. Things that we didn't think was possible. Yet at the same time, so the elites, it seems, are getting the benefits of all the latest sports science and are pushing new limits of what humans can do. It feels like the baseline of what the population is able to do is going down. And I don't know if you saw this, there was a study recently, I think it was 25 million kids in 28 different countries. They basically observed that, I think it's compared to maybe 30 years ago, the average speed it takes a child, and this was between the ages 7 and 17, the average speed it takes to do a mile has gone up.
Slower. They're 90 seconds
slower.
slower.
They're 90 seconds slower. So there's a certain irony there, isn't there?
That's a great point.
Two things you said, Lisa, which I think are really important. Number one is the point you made about if you think you're going to be okay, you probably haven't spent much time with people in their 70s, 80s, or 90s, or if you're going to be okay without doing anything. And unfortunately, in my own life, there's been a stark realization this year. I won't go into all the details, but my mum, who lives 5 minutes away from me, Christmas Day evening, she had a fall, she got admitted to hospital, she was in for 3 weeks. There wasn't enough staff to take her out of bed. I'd go in and do my own rehab. I know how quickly one can decondition. And unfortunately, since Mum came home, 3 weeks after being in hospital, she has not been the same. She has not recovered to anywhere near her baseline. So, first point I wanted to address was
modern look. Thick, absorbent layers. But these napkins aren't just elegant.
If you haven't seen it, you may not take it as seriously as it needs to be taken. And then the other point related to that, and I kept this page open in your book, it's in the chapter on Training 101, but the graph that you have pulled from the Jason Clifford and Brigham Young University, I spend so much time looking at that graph. I think everyone should look at it.
This is figure 11, yeah?
Figure 11.
Yeah, this is the VO2 max decline.
It is utterly remarkable. The central point I get from you is that decline is inevitable in your physicality. It's going to happen. You said before that we understand at what rate it is likely to happen. And I think it's genius this way that you go, if you want to do that in your 90s or your 80s, whatever that point is, you have to account for the decline, and therefore you have to be able to do some specific things in your 40s. And many people who listen to this show, Peter, do park run. Community events every Saturday where you run or walk 5K.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I don't know if you're up for a little experiment here, but this graph basically has, well, maybe do you want to explain the graph? Because you're probably better at doing it than me.
Sure, yeah. So the graph, it shows, I could probably do it from memory, but it shows three lines. So these lines are placed on against an X and Y axis. So the X axis is your age, and it's obviously increasing to the right. And the Y-axis shows the VO2 max. Now, I can't remember how much we discussed VO2 max on the first.
We didn't. So we get
so
that one together.
let me explain this first. So, VO2 max stands for maximum ventilation of oxygen. So, what is ventilation? Ventilation rate or minute ventilation rate of oxygen. It means how much oxygen you're using at any point in time. So, ventilation rate is defined in liters per minute, and you and I sitting here right now having this discussion are probably at 0.3, 0.4 liters per minute. Maybe 0.5 liters per minute because we're a little animated in how we're speaking. Right? So we're at 500 cc per minute of oxygen consumption. If we were to stand up and walk around this room, that would maybe increase to 1 liter per minute. If we were to go outside there and jog back and forth, that would increase to 2.5 liters per minute. And eventually, if we kept forcing ourselves to exercise at ever increasing pace and demand, we would reach a maximum. And that can be tested for in a laboratory. So it's done either on a bicycle or on a treadmill, stationary, because you have to have a mask put over your face, and the mask is what is able to measure the amount of oxygen you're consuming. And this is one of the more important tests that's done by elite endurance athletes. And so if you talk about the most elite endurance athletes, they're typically going to be cyclists, cross-country skiers, runners. And so whether it's Kipchoge or Tadej Pogacar, these people have astronomical VO2 maxes. Yeah. So the higher it is, the fitter you are. This is your peak aerobic capacity. It's normalized by weight, so ultimately the numbers that you're used to seeing are reported as, a number, say 50, and it's converted into milliliters, so 50 milliliters per minute per kilogram. Okay, so the higher that number, the fitter you are. And so, we have tables that tell us, and I think I put one of those in here, that tell you by sex and by age where you rank by percentile. Now this graph is showing something different. It's showing people in the top, I think 5%, the middle of the pack, so the median or the 50th percentile, and the bottom 5%. And it's showing over time how those three lines decline.
They all decline.
They all decline.
That's the key,
and in
isn't it?
fact, the rate of decline is actually steeper for the fittest people because they're starting at the highest point.
But even though it's steeper, they still have...
They always remain higher.
They remain higher.
That's right. So you always want to be on the top line. What this graph also does that I find interesting, and the reason I included it in the book, is it shows various activity levels and what they correspond to in terms of a given VO2 max so that you can observe when various people cross over. So at this point I've lost my ability to memorize it, so I'll just kind of turn to the graph. So, for example, briskly climbing stairs requires a VO2 max of approximately 32 milliliters per kilogram per minute.
It doesn't matter your age, right? If you want to go briskly upstairs,
that's right.
Whether you're at 30 or 90, you need
to be at about 32 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute.
Okay.
Now, here's what's interesting. People in the 50th percentile of the population at the age of 25 have a VO2 max of about 44, so they can do that pretty easily. By the time they reach 50, they've descended to that level. So a person who is my age, who's 50, at the middle of the population's fitness level, is just at the point where they're going to lose the ability to briskly climb a flight of stairs. And it's only going to go down from there. Now, interestingly, someone in the bottom 5%, even at the age of 25, is below that level. Wow. Okay, now let's look at someone in the top 5%. Someone in the top 5%, who, by the way, at the age of 25 is at about 62.
In terms of that VO2.
In terms of their VO2 max. They don't hit that level of being right at their threshold until they're 75. So, one of the things about this graph that I find interesting is it stops at 75. So one of the reasons we show this graph to our patients is to say, oh, and by the way, the reason we hold you to a higher standard than this graph, we hold our patients to a standard of being, it's aspirational, but this is what we want everyone to be at. We want everyone to be at the top 5% for someone 10 to 20 years younger. And the reason for that is we want you to actually be able to thrive into your final decade of life.
And you have said, Peter, before, there is no reason that most people cannot be in the top 25%.
Absolutely not. There is simply, I mean, you would have to have a mitochondrial disease to not be able to reach the top 25% of your age.
So this is really empowering, I think, for people that no matter how old you are, of course, the earlier the better, you want to give yourself buffer room. So let me just summarize to make sure I've got it right, make sure everyone's following along, but essentially, your VO2 max is a super important metric. It is going to get worse as you age in a relatively predictable fashion. Therefore, if you want to be doing something like briskly walking upstairs in your 80s, we know what VO2 max you need in your 80s, and therefore we can say what VO2 max you need today. And it's such a logical and beautifully simple way of looking at it, and it makes it very, very tangible. The reason I brought up parkrun, Peter, is because one of the things it talks about in this graph is jog 6 miles per hour on flat grounds. Right, so 6 miles per hour is roughly 10-minute mile pace. Yep. Right, a 5K, so a park run. For anyone who does park run, I appreciate some people walk, but that is roughly a half an hour park run. I think I know a lot of people my age or 10 years older who are in great shape, but they can do a 30-minute 5K. Right. So what's really interesting to me is that, I mean, it's brutal, this graph. It's utterly brutal, right? If you are about 37 years old, right? Give or take a year, I haven't got exact lines going down. So if you're 37 years old and you can do a park run in half an hour.
I'm obsessed with my results. I cannot get enough.
Achieve smooth, natural-looking, long-lasting results with the Juvederm collection of fillers.
An hour. Like, by the time you are 75, you can barely walk up a very gentle hill at 3 miles per hour.
Yeah, if at 37 your limit is just being able to run that 30-minute park run, at 75 you're going to have a very difficult time getting around. Yeah. So in other words, at 37, you need to be hammering through that park run. You need to be running it in 21 or 22 minutes if you want to make sure that when you're 85, you have no physical impediment. I mean, the way I describe it to patients is, I'm not so deluded to think that at 80, I'm going to be doing what I am today. But what I want to know that I can do when I'm 80 is take a train through Europe and take my own luggage with me. And I pay attention to what that means now. I pay attention to how quickly I sometimes need to move through a train station with my luggage. And even now I know, like you have to hustle sometimes. So, now it's not the limit of my ability today, but if I'm banking on that being the limit of my ability when I'm 80, I know what level of fitness I have to have when I'm 50.
Yeah,
and it's way higher.
It's way higher. The decline is inevitable, so you need to give yourself buffer room. And again, just to be clear, look, I get not everyone's a runner, right? So it's not that you have to do a 30-minute 5K or be, some equivalent version, whether it's...
Yeah, I'm not a runner either, but it can be other things. So I do most of my cardio training on a bike or on a treadmill, and if on a treadmill, I do it on a steep incline or on a stair climber.
Yeah.
And I've just decided, and I still go back and forth. Sometimes I want to get back into running because I used to be a runner, but I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm going to save my joints. I'm going to let it go. But there are lots of things that I still need to be able to do on my feet. I love being outdoors. So I ruck a lot. And that's a great way for me to add the conditioning element.
And for people who've never heard that term, ruck, would you mind explaining it?
Yeah, so it's walking with a very heavy weighted backpack. So I walk all over our neighborhood, because I live in Austin, it's all hills. So it's up and down very steep hills with a weighted backpack. And depending, sometimes I will go with 60 pounds, which is normally what I do. And there are other days when I really want to push it, I'll do 100 pounds. And that, I'm walking, but it's still the most taxing thing you can imagine when you're carrying that much weight to walk, up a hill that's 15% grade with more than half your body weight on your back. Yeah. So you don't have to be a runner, I think, is the point to test this system. And the other thing that is important to understand is it does all, at the end of the day, come down to what you can do on your feet. So being able to walk on an uneven surface, being able to walk up a hill, those will become the rate limiting steps as you age. I want to go back to something you said earlier, and I'm sorry to hear this news about your mom, but it actually is a sad illustration of a very important point. Now, I write in the book about the fact that the mortality from a fall, if you're over the age of 65 and break your hip or femur, is as high as 30% in 1 year. And most people, myself included, when I first learned of this literature, because I did a whole AMA on this topic, and initially when the analysts, because I have a team of analysts that helped me with everything, initially when they were pulling this literature, I was like, guys, come on, this is nonsense. Use your logic here. Yeah. There's no chance the mortality can be that high. And they kept showing me paper after paper after paper. And this is often the case. The analysts just keep showing me data, and I'm not willing to believe it. And I'm like, guys, come on. You're being stupid here.
Yeah, I love that. Use your logic, guys. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, they're actually right. So, it's like, I would say a very conservative bracket is 15 to 30% of people, once they reach the age of 65, if they fall and break a femur or hip, they're not going to be alive in a year. But here's a stat that I didn't include in the book, and I wish I did, because it's just as important. Of the 70 to 85% who are not dead in a year, 50% of them will have a complete reduction in level of function by one measure of unit. So, for example, if they used to walk freely, they will now require a cane for the rest of their life. If they used to require a cane, they will require a walker. If they used to require a walker, they will be in a wheelchair. So in other words, there's a huge cost to this. And there's actually another graph in there that I think is very sobering. which shows the mortality associated with accidental death by decade. And appropriately so, we in the US are very fixated on accidental death due to opioid. Because this last year was the first year that that number of deaths eclipsed 100,000 in the US. It's a staggering number. I believe it was 106,000 people died in the US last year due to opioid poisoning. But at a population adjusted basis, that's nothing compared to what falls do to people over 75. And that's the graph I have in there, which shows deaths normalized per population basis. And all other forms of accidental deaths, of which the other two big ones are overdose and auto death, they're completely dwarfed by deaths associated with falling. So yes, the point here is most people in their 40s, in their 50s, I mean, it just wouldn't even occur to us that you could fall, let alone that a fall could be the end of your life, either in that moment or much more commonly in the coming year.
Yeah, it's incredibly sobering hearing that. Of course, I've seen that firsthand with my mum, a demonstration of that. This idea that, well, if it's what we've just been talking about, even though we may be talking about strength per se now, or a mixture of strength and stability, I guess, the principle of the VO2 max declining, it's the same kind of thing, right? We're going to decline.
And it is. It's strength and it's stability, and it's you know
But the point, we're going to decline, so we need the buffer room so that if we do fall and break our hip when we're 65, we don't want to be in that 30% bucket. We don't want to be in the other 50% bucket of the ones who are not dead, right? We want to be in the other bucket where we are, I don't know what percentage that is, where you get back to your pre-fall baseline. That's what we want, and to do that, we need to build a buffer, right? So you have these 4 pillars of exercise or movement when it comes to being that generalist who's able to do the things that they want to do in their marginal decades. So you have strength, you have zone 2 cardio, you have VO2 max, and you have stability. And I really want to make sure we make this as practical as possible for people, right? But I wonder if it's worth just giving the broad overview at the moment of these 4 pillars, and I don't know if we can say this or not, but what percentage of time, perhaps,
No, I
we should allocate
strong feelings about that. Yeah.
We should allocate to each one.
Yeah. So you've got it right. Those are the 4 pillars. I will say that we have the most data, the most clarity around 2 of them: strength and VO2 max. So the data for strength and VO2 max are undeniable, meaning we just have so much epidemiology that is so uniform in its direction, so strong in its signal, that, and I go through this at great length in the book, because I want the reader to understand the difference between good epidemiology, according to the criteria of Austin Bradford Hill, and weak epidemiology. For example, what we see in nutrition, where the epidemiology has a very difficult time parsing signal from noise. But in exercise, that's not the case, and I go through all of the criteria why. So when the epidemiology says having a very high VO2 max leads to a longer life, I mean, it's crystal clear.
Yeah.
And by the way, we haven't mentioned that, so it's worth mentioning that. So everything we've talked about so far vis-a-vis VO2 max has been in the context of quality of life, which for most people matters more than length of life, but it should be noted that a high VO2 max is associated with a lower all-cause mortality to a greater extent than any other health metric, including not smoking, not having high blood pressure, not having coronary artery disease, not having end-stage renal disease. None of those compare to the harm that they bring more than being unfit does.
To make sure you're taking action after watching this video, I've created a free guide to help you build.
I had no idea this was going to be so fucking long, but Jesus Christ. I'm
But my quality of life declined as well, as one high-rise after the next was built adjacent to us. I lived this and watched it happen for years, so I don't need to be told by a developer, consultant, realtor, or commissioner's sister that a new high-rise will make my life, my neighborhood, or my property value better, because I know this to be false. I also don't need to be threatened by a developer who tells the community that if they don't get what they want, they will build an ugly, monolithic structure to essentially spite the community, or not hire local if they don't approve if the city doesn't approve the rezoning, as they did this morning at their contractor meet and greet. Are these the kind of strong-arm tactics that we want in our city? When I found the North Beach area of Pompano and subsequently bought a home there, I thought I had found a hidden gem in the diverse Southeast Florida real estate landscape. I was encouraged by the fact that previous city commissions had upheld RM45 zoning with a 105-foot restriction as being most compatible with the neighborhood, and that nothing over 105 feet had been built in over 40 years in the North Beach area, despite the efforts of several developers. After Tiffany Gardens and other area high-rises were built in the late 60s and early 70s, it was recognized that these towers were not compatible with the community. To hold up Tiffany Gardens as an example of compatibility is misguided, as this height has been demonstrated and forced to be non-compatible with the existing neighborhood.
I need
Furthermore, the Sabia property is also not a comparable example development, as it is further from 1508 North Ocean Boulevard than the entire Hillsborough Shores neighborhood and all of the other low-rise buildings and single-family homes in the North Beach area. Moreover, I saw the preservation of the neighborhood and community and the support of the city commissioners for this preservation as progress rather than holding the city back. Progress is not always a shiny new high-rise building that dwarfs all neighboring structures. Progress is having the courage to stand up to developers, do what is right for the community, and support your constituents. Progress is having thriving neighborhoods and communities with residents who take pride in where they live. Progress is sustainable development with beautiful new buildings that seamlessly blend in with an existing neighborhood while working within existing zoning standards. And most importantly, progress is having parks and beaches where residents from all parts of the city feel welcome, regardless of how they look or how much money they make, or to use the architect's words, what class they are. Tonight's vote comes down to two simple facts. One, the property is currently zoned to be no higher than 105 feet, and two, approving a rezoning to a PDI allows any developer to propose a building of unlimited height. These are the only facts that exist tonight. Everything else about this project is still to be determined. No jobs have been created yet, regardless of how many meet and greets the developers had. In fact, if the developer was really interested in creating jobs for local residents, he would not have spent the past 4 years trying to figure out how to rezone the property to maximize his investment. He would be building a 105-foot high building right now and employing the same local contractors. Instead, he is threatening to not hire local unless he gets his way. The community has banded together as evidenced by the strong opposition you have heard tonight, and I am part of that strong opposition. The community is against development that is not compatible with our neighborhood. We are not against development. Rezoning this property is not progress. It will not improve our property values. It will not bring more people to the area. It will not improve our lives. It will, however, be a violation of our trust.
Thank you. Next speaker. Name and address and indicate if you've been sworn.
I have been sworn, Sandy Von Staden, 3201 Beacon Street in Hillsborough Shores. I also own a condo since 1980. Our family has owned a condo right down the street from this property in North Beach in a 2-story building that is going to continue to stay in my family for my daughter and my grandchildren. Tonight, you have heard from the developer. You have heard from staff. The developer chose to come directly to you, not to go back to planning and zoning, to come directly to you, and it is your job tonight to vote on that. He came to you with a 6-0 no vote. Your staff told you earlier this evening they came to you with a slightly modified plan. They characterized it as substantially modified. I wrote those words down. There's a difference. They talk as though they're reducing something. Reducing what? Something they imagined? They never had anything to reduce. The zoning height is 105 feet. I understand the differences. My husband and I, for all of the 1990s, owned rental property right down the street from the Sabia in the 700 block. We knew we were buying somewhere where there were high rises. We accepted it. If I still owned there, I would be accepting the Sabia. But our North Beach is different. The other thing is all of you up here have signed on, participated, and paid for a plan for the scenic A1A corridor that obligates you and every other municipality along scenic A1A in Broward to preserve and enhance and protect the intrinsic resources that you are responsible for in the community. And you have 6 that you are responsible to preserve, protect, and make sure everything around it is compatible as a scenic view and iconic use of our highway. Hillsborough Inlet Park and Lighthouse Museum, the historic fishing fleet, North Ocean Park, the iconic fishing pier, the Beach Branch Library, and Indian Mound Park. North Ocean Park belongs to everyone. They can build 105 feet, but do not eclipse this iconic scenic A1A resource with a 22-story or 205 feet, whatever it is, building. They can tell you it's slum and blight at North Ocean Park. If it is, that's on you. You're responsible to maintain that park, and I think you are. And I think people from all districts in this city should be welcome there, and you should think carefully about what goes on a postage stamp lot directly in front of one of the resources you're totally entrusted to protect and preserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Further input from the public? Please come forward. Name and address from the record. Must indicate if you've been sworn.
Dominic Camposio, 3248 Northeast 16th Street and 3246 Northeast 16th Street. And yes, I have been sworn in.
Good, thank you.
I actually live directly across the street. I'm on the southwest corner. So I get to look at this empty lot and have been doing so for quite a long time. I've been a resident here for 30 years. I actually live on the area that a lady rudely referred to as the slum area that 16th Street has been for years. She did that on our little newspaper, the thing this morning on the next door online, and did so this evening. So now I know who it is. Just so that you know, it was a lady in red. So we'll openly say that now. I like progress. I enjoy progress. I've traveled all over the world, lived all over the world, have property all over the world. But I've also found that this building is a little bit overwhelming. Even though they've lowered it to 19 stories or 200 plus feet, 27 or 28 residents, I feel that it's an optical illusion when you look at that building. I get to look at that lot every single day as I walk out of my house. I also parked in front of the Sabia, the new Sabia, which is a nice building, last evening with my wife, and I said, look at this across the street. We parked at the church parking lot. And when we looked at it, it's really overwhelming. You really have to look up and up and up, and you see this huge, monstrous building that probably fits in that neighborhood, but these buildings do not fit in our neighborhood. My suggestion is really simple. Why not just cut the floors down another 6 stories in that big open space in the middle that looks huge in that photograph that is really not that huge? Again, it's an optical illusion. Throw those 6 stories down there and leave it. Just park it there. So now you've got a 10 or 12-story building, 14-story building. You don't have any of that empty space in the center of that building. And you can probably house as many residents or sell as many residents as you could building it up. The other thing is, my question is to all of you up here. And if you've been elected to do your jobs, and you're doing it well from what I hear, especially you, Mayor Hardin, I wanted to know parking. I'm the guy that most of these people that come to the beach, I never find a parking spot at my house, including my own driveway, not to mention my grass, my lawn, all these wonderful things that happen in Pompano Beach to go to this great beach that we have. You know what? It's a joke. We've called the city. I've called your office, Mayor Hardin, and also submitted a letter, and also to the general the city manager, Mr. Harrison, never to get a response. I've called the BSO, and the BSO have come to remove cars, vehicles. I even have donuts for these men at the end of the night at midnight because there's so much hatred at that beach at the end of the night. But I want to say this. Before you do make a decision on this, I know I'm over time, I'd like to know the heavy equipment that's going into this property, it's got to go up and down A1A and turn up Northeast 16th Street. Where are they going to park these vehicles? What about the heavy equipment that's being put inside that little piece of postage land? Where are they going to put the cranes? And how dangerous is this going to be for everyone else? So again, there's a few of us here that I think, 2 or 3 of us that I know would buy that property from the present owners and help develop it the way we think it should be developed. Thank you.
Thank you. Further input from the public? Going once? Twice? Public input is closed. Thank you. Is there further applicant? Would the applicant?
Of course there is.
Okay.
I will try to be as brief as possible. We heard from a lot of people this evening, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm not going to speak to all of the items that were raised tonight. I'm sure that someone else on my team might say things that I missed, but just a couple of things quickly I want to touch on. The reasons stated by staff that the Planning and Zoning Board recommended denial of the rezoning application was because the application was did not include a true mixed-use component. That was one. And then the other was, I think, was a non-engagement with the beach and the park. Again, the site plan application is not before you tonight, but the PDI rezoning application is before you tonight. And through this revised rezoning application, you've seen that we have provided space for true mixed use. You've heard from our development team that we've already reached out to retailers. As a matter of fact, you heard someone here tonight say that he's interested in moving into this space. We expanded the retail space in direct response to the comment by planning staff. Secondly, I know that you have a very difficult job up there tonight, and I don't envy you, and I don't think I'll ever run for office. So I commend each of you for being up there and remembering, I know you've heard it a million times, that there are criteria established. And the question is whether or not we satisfy that criteria, not whether or not it's the most popular for the people that show up, not necessarily few, but the people that show up. It's for the entire city. So we hope that you keep that in mind. With regard to setting precedent, again, you can even see from this illustration that's been left up tonight, we're not breaking new ground. We're not creating something that's not already in existence. The single-family homes, but for the one that's across from A1A, which is A1A is approximately 56 feet wide. So except for that, there aren't single-family homes. We're not surrounded by single-family homes, so we're not setting that precedent. Just a few comments I wanted to just quickly address very quickly. Someone made a comment about needing to go back to Planning and Zoning Board because the professionals at that level needed to opine on the revised plan. But you have professionals on staff. You've engaged outside professionals to review our application, and the issues raised by those professionals have been addressed, and you saw that in the application that we're presenting to you tonight. There were comments rather made about aesthetics. There are a lot of comments about aesthetics, a few comments made about traffic, and appearance. Again, those are site plan issues. And if this rezoning gets to move forward, we can continue to address those issues at the site plan level. Planning and Zoning will get another opportunity to review those. Again, the application is with regard to the rezoning. I just want to remind you, or for the record, I should say, I'm not going to read the whole thing again, but someone did make mention of the purpose of the PDI. They listed that purpose as a requirement or a criteria, and it's not. The section he read to you is from the purpose section, not the criteria section. Specifically, he spoke about design being compatible with both surrounding and existing development and available infrastructure, and he went on. Again, I want to stress that was from the purpose, not the criteria. With regard to the criteria, it speaks to compliance with the future land use designation, which this application is, consistent with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, which it is, as it furthers residential redevelopment in the area, and the density that we're proposing is consistent with what's permitted in the zoning district. I know everybody's ready to go. I have like a lot more comments, but I will stop here. We are available to answer questions. I believe Ms. Keith has some comments also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Just to kind of qualify a few points and help hopefully anybody in the public, I want to reiterate that there's no request for an increased density here. The 28 units is allowed under the current zoning, so there is no increased request for zoning with the PDI development. I also heard mentioned a few times tonight, and I've heard it repeatedly over the year, that we're asking for an unlimited height. The PDI does not allow us an unlimited height. We specifically set the height limit in there, the 200 feet. So there is not an unlimited height. So that's just kind of, I want really people to understand some of these things that seem to be scaring them. Again, without the increase in density, you're not having any change in traffic, infrastructure requirements, all of those things that are being brought forward are there contained today in its existing condition. But a really important point of this is when we talk about what do we want a building to look like and what do we want it to be. And I've heard mention of threat. It's not a threat to say that if you stay at the current zoning, you end up with a block-like building, because that's the only thing you can build. And we showed you the graphic of the massing study. And actually, under our current design, our building mass and volume-wise is smaller. It allows more light, more air to flow, and so it has less bulk and volume than the square block that the current zoning forces you to get under a current zoning issue. That's one of the reasons why in your zoning code you have all of your different PD zoning categories to encourage unique and iconic designs. And I appreciate the reference to the scenic, iconic A1A study, because that's exactly over the last year some of the things that we talked about and looked at with this building. It's some of the reason that we made the footprint smaller to pull it back from A1A to create the art plaza and wider walkways along A1A, bringing the artistic pavers out in that area and having the art installation to create a vista at the corner of 16th and A1A to actually it be inviting to our residents of the whole city to say, hey, here is North Ocean Park, come here. And there's been all kinds of discussion about North Ocean Park. I've been to Ocean Park. I go to North Ocean Park. It's a great park. We love the kite boarders. We've talked to the kite boarders, the surfers, all of those folks. We're looking to do amenities at the park to make it better for the folks that are using it. But most definitely, the developer agreement that would come with this rezoning locks in that the parking, the additional things that have been discussed here, the park, the crosswalks on A1A, the art plazas, all of that laid out in a developer agreement along with this rezoning are required. There's not an option. It's not maybe they won't build them. You only have 15 parking spaces there today. And what I have heard repeatedly for 2 years is that's a huge problem. And I've heard it from the folks in the area, the folks who have people parking in their yard and in their houses. We are increasing the parking spaces by 30 spaces. You will have 45 public parking spaces right there for folks to use. So it's for the use of the public. So it is a huge amenity. I've never had a client who's offered structured parking to the public before and offered that the city could meter them. That's a very unique offer for a developer. And quite honestly, it came because we reduced the size of the building. It didn't come because, hey, all of a sudden we want to give structured parking away. It's very expensive. But when we took floors off the building, we ended up with extra parking, and it wasn't enough to take a floor off the building. So the developer came and said, well, you know what? They want more parking. Let's give the bottom floor to the public. So over the last year, a lot of these things that happen and transpire, and a lot of the questions and the conversations create things that happen that have made the project better for the community as a whole. And the cafe, I think people are getting confused. I hear restaurant. I keep hearing restaurant, and cars and traffic and how many tables and chairs. This is a small beachside cafe.
It is not to be a restaurant with folks all driving here and coming to go have lunch and dinner at a restaurant here. It's a small beachside cafe. The idea is for the folks that are going to the beach and using the park to come get a coffee or get a sandwich or it is not intended to be a full big restaurant with folks coming. It is not big enough. But the other thing that really struck me hard in a lot of these conversations that I heard tonight is the suggestion that the renderings somehow are doctored and that things are not to scale, and this concern about the size of this property. And I'm going to tell you, that drawing is exactly to scale. It is exactly to scale. And if I show you the same drawing with the big box on it, whatever you want to call it, a cruise ship, a cereal box, it's been all called all kinds of things, it's going to look just as big. I'm talking 5 stories. Whether it's 50 feet, I hear 60 feet, take your number. When you look at that building, that is not a significant number, but it changes what the ability for any developer to bring to the city and do for a city to help with a project. So the answer is we've worked really hard, and I know that's our job, but really to create what is Pompano and what is Pompano-ish. And maybe you don't like the design. Maybe I heard some people say South Beach, and I was like, oh, a year ago I did think we were a little South Beach. And so it's very hard. And I live over here on the beach now, and I'm in a high rise, so I'm in one of those bad people. But I respect this community, and I respect every area of the city, and each area is unique and each area is different. But this is a piece of property that needs to develop for Pompano. And we need to have good quality thought out development, which this commission, our P&Z, and our residents have promoted for years. And we need projects that help to increase our value but contain our growth opportunities. This does not have any more density. The traffic is not going to happen. And what's really we're looking at is the benefit to the public as an overall is really provided with this design. And there's not too much more given this. When I hear people say go back to P&Z, you go back to P&Z doesn't take 5 floors off this building. We truly are down to 2 design options. You go for something unique and iconic, which our code asks for when we go to a PD zoning. You ask for it to come with exceptional design elements, which is what we brought forward to you with the parking, the crosswalks for A1A. I hear about people trying to get across A1A. All of those things have been thought about to enhance the whole community. So we ask you to consider those tonight, and we ask you to consider those in your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. I'll open it up for commission discussion at this point. Who wants to go first? Anybody? Oh, Commissioner Eaton.
Thank you.
Oh, we've got a little issue. Thank you. Okay, we're still live. Yes.
Hello? Okay. So, a couple of things, too, that I want to say. Besides, you all mentioned the ex parte communication, but I also served on the Planning and Zoning Board when the project came through the first time around. And I voted against this, of course. I made some remarks and requests, and for instance, about the retail. It really didn't seem to offer anything back to the community. It wasn't something that felt alive or felt like it fit into the community. It was very tall, it was angular, it was sharp, it was harsh to me. And in coming back and really redesigning it, to me, it's a significantly different project in the look, in the feel, what it offers back to the community. And honestly, I couldn't say, sitting here tonight, how I would have voted on this project when I was sitting on the Planning and Zoning. Had this project come before me, I simply cannot say that I would have voted against it. I could have voted for it at the P&Z. So with so many issues, these projects are always complicated, and I really like to have the whole picture when I'm voting on it, but I'm looking at the response letter, and I will need some clarification on the response letter. On errors and omissions on C on page 2 of the response from the applicant.
Just for the, what document are you looking at?
This is the one 4-page document called P&Z Motion to Response by Applicant.
Very good, thank you.
Right, so page 2. Starting with number 8. I'm just going to go through that real quickly. Applicant removed Exhibit D. I want to go to number 10. All references to neighboring properties have been removed. Number 11. Exhibits pertaining to public outreach and landscape were removed from the application as requested. Number 12. Parking component removed from Exhibit D. Site plan application will include required parking. Number 13, deviation request removed. And then on the page 4 of number 4, illustrated improvements to North Ocean Park shall obtain. Excuse me, that's the first, but the response is applicant removed illustrations of the park. Applicant submitted a developer's agreement to the city for park improvements. And when we met with the applicant during one-on-ones, I saw some incredible renderings of paved walkways, new bathroom facilities, what do you call them? Pavilions, and a completely revamped park with art and possibly a water feature, or at least the art in the public space on the thing with the consistent wave paver design, which is just, I think, is incredible, and going with pavers, and especially an undulating, ground moving area, and having some permeability, and it showed that continuity from the street to the park to the beach, much better than concrete. Anyway, none of that is here in the backup. And I realize that this is a zoning issue, and that is a site plan issue. But if that really is going to, I would just like to see the whole picture of what is projected to be in the park improvements, and perhaps the parking improvements, and perhaps even 16th Street improvements, or how this is going to improve the entire area. And so I just think I need to have that before going forward. And if you could maybe enlighten me, at least.
Yes, Commissioner. Those items were items that we had submitted in our application to the city. And this is a little tricky because it's just a rezoning. Most of those elements come when we do a site plan. But because we felt they were important elements, because there are items that we wanted to show not just yourselves, but the public, because there always is that fear about what will or won't happen. So there were items that we felt we're very committed to doing within the project. So we included them in our application. So when you see that those are what are being referred to, we had included a landscape booklet that had a lot of the paver designs and a lot of that detail of what the project would look like at street level and from sidewalk level. The neighborhood meetings, when it talks about the neighborhood and adjoining buildings, we had a graphic about how tall other buildings were around us, and we had so different heights, so you could really get an idea of what was going on around us, as well as we included a packet of all the different outreach meetings we've had, actually probably over the last 3 years or 2 years. And we also had all the parking components that showed the parking and how the street would work, and all of that included. Staff actually requested us to take that out of the packet because it's not a site plan issue, it's a rezoning. and we kind of went back and forth. So that's how we came to the developer agreement that you heard about tonight, that we felt there has to be some way to lock this in if we're not going to make it part of the zoning. So we then requested that there be a developer agreement, and your city attorney has been working with our attorney to draft that, and you will have that at your second reading, the formality of that, the final draft. I know the city has a draft, and we have one, I guess, that Hope can address, but we can provide you. I actually have on flash drive a lot of those. You saw some of those in our meeting, but unfortunately, it was a request of the city that we remove that from our packet.
Oh.
I'm sorry, just really quickly, can I also add, some of it you did see in the presentation already, and then some of it, if there are particular things you're looking for, there's an opportunity when we come back to second reading, we can provide that for you then. So another opportunity to kind of push it forward so that
I understand. I see that, but I just don't see the logic in it. Absolutely. I just don't see the logic in it. If you're going to come back with a development agreement that says you're going to do X, Y, and Z, at least, then what is the harm in being able to show it?
We agree with you. We had provided.
Because, in order to, if you don't, you have to put up or shut up, right? If you're putting up this picture, you're going to have to come second reading, and you're going to have to produce what you said you're producing on the first meeting. I mean, I would think, and I would say that, but as a matter of verifying.
We're very happy to include those exhibits. They can be attached to the developer agreement. The graphics can as well, can be attached to the developer agreement as well to lock in, if you like the pavers or the sidewalks or whatever particular you like. If you want that included as a illustrative exhibit of what we're committing to do, we're happy to do that. We have a site design of the park. We have all the parking laid out and all of that done so that those documents are all able to be provided to you again.
Well, I'm just saying that to me it feels like I don't have a complete picture of the project, and that I would have to say that I would just like to, at least for discussion purposes, move it to second reading so that we can get the full picture of what you're offering, because I don't feel like I have it now. So.
Well, I apologize. It was submitted by us to the city.
Pardon me?
Pardon me? It was submitted to the city.
Oh, you did have some of this in the proposal earlier.
We included it in the presentation because we knew it wasn't provided in the application. So we put some of it in here, and some of the stuff that
was a small amount.
Yes, we have a lot more information that we had included.
Yeah.
Mr. Berman, did you want to interject here?
I just wanted to clear the record. When Commissioner Eaton was done, I did have a question for her. Commissioner, and I'm not picking or anything, I just want to make it clear for purposes of the record that's being set tonight. You testified that you have familiarity with this project through other quasi-judicial proceedings previously, but is your decision tonight, whether it's for or against, that doesn't matter, only solely going to be based on the presentation here and the evidence before you at this time, and not any prior proceedings? Is that correct?
Yes, I do understand that.
Thank you very much.
All right, Commissioner, go ahead.
I may have another comment, but I'm
sure. Further commission discussion. Commissioner McGee.
I have a few things I just wanted to verify from. There's been a lot of information, a lot of opinions tonight. Mr. Berman, when a few people have brought up this Pandora's box or precedent thing. As far as I understand, any zoning change, any request like this has to be completely thought about on its own merits.
That's correct.
And so it would be anything that wanted to build anywhere else on the beach.
Each property, each development, each application is considered on its own merits.
Okay. The next question I have is, with this rezoning and what they've put forward, because I've heard in some of the emails and stuff a concern that it would be flipped. Anything that is approved here would be locked into a sale, like as far as the height and stuff and the setbacks?
Anything that's approved here is the rezoning. The rezoning comes with a plan in this type of rezoning. There's no maximum setback, this, that. When you have a plan development, everything is set in the site plan, and that is what they are bound to. And anyone who purchases it is bound to the same plan. If they get approved and walk away tomorrow and someone else buys it, that's what they have to do.
or they have to come back and start this process all over again if they want to make any changes. Okay?
Back to the developer. A lot of people have referred to the lot as a postage stamp. This, from what I understand, this property versus what is currently allowed actually has a smaller footprint?
Correct.
And as you said, smaller.
And a smaller volume in mass, correct.
Okay.
In terms of numbers, it's 27,000 square feet of a lot. The parking footprint is about 16,000, and each tower is plus or minus 3,000 square feet each. So, yeah, it's a postage stamp, but everything fits, and fits comfortably now. Like I said, the lot is 27,000. We're at 16, which we have 11,000 square feet of pavers, of entry, of grass, all the landscaping. And then the tower portions, each one itself is just above like the gross number would probably be just over 3,000 square feet each. So that's 6,000 square feet of developed on the 27,000 square foot lot.
I might have more, but I'll move over for right now.
Okay, very good. Further commission discussion. Mr. Commissioner, Vice Mayor Moss?
Well, I certainly feel the emotion tonight. I'm a little disappointed that there have been some exaggerations and misstatements, but yeah, it's an emotional thing. There's no one in this room that lives further away from this project than I. No one. And so in order to familiarize myself with it, I went over there. No, I'm further away. Sorry. In order to familiarize myself with this project, I drove over there last Friday and took a good look around. And I could take a lot of these comments about the massiveness of the building seriously if it weren't for the hulking big concrete boxes to the immediate north of this. I'm going to support this. I think it's a very, very attractive plan. I think it's going to be very good not only for the neighborhood, but for the whole city. It will generate a good deal of income and taxes for the city. And I think it's beautiful. Change is something that a lot of people hate. Many people hate. But as I've said up here on many occasions, the only constant in this world is change. And I think this will be a change, but a change for the better in that neighborhood. So I'm going to support it.
Very good. I look at this, and I be honest with you, I told folks, I think it's a beautiful building. I know some folks, they say, well, no, it's too much like South Beach or something. I think it is iconic. And that is what we have asked for in Pompano Beach. So the building itself, I think, is it's great, beautiful. I love it. It's just the wrong location. I think we've got a problem with the compatibility. Ladies and gentlemen, please. I'm not here for applause. I appreciate it. This piece of property backs up to a park, and it's zoned 105 feet. And I understand 10 stories is 10 stories, but I just do not believe it is compatible with that park there. If this project were slated at a different location, man, I'd be 100% behind it. And it's just in that location, I just do not think it's compatible with the surroundings, and that's my biggest issue. I wish we had another spot, and I understand the developers are stuck with that spot because that's what they bought, but sorry about that. The fact of the matter is we've got a park sitting right there, and yes, it is a great park, and I know that everybody loves parks, and I can't support it for that reason. That's it. Sorry. Like I said, beautiful design, and the developer, I have to admit, they have worked hard on the design. They have worked with the community. Perhaps not as hard as the community would like to see it, and I understand everybody wants everything perfect. We can't always get there, and I've talked to folks in the community about that too. They may come back with further options, and I have cautioned some folks that be careful. Don't say no to everything, but this is too much, and that's my position. Further commission discussion. Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Perkins.
When the project came to me in 2017, I was not pleased with the project. But however, when the developer showed the project to me a few weeks ago, I was very excited about it. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great fit. And I think everybody pretty much feels as though it's a nice project. It looks good. I thought it would work for the community, but after receiving calls and emails and trying to return some of them, and some of them I couldn't. I do have an ear of listening to the people. And I am very sensitive when a person says to me, I live right next door. I live across the street. I live on the side. Now, to me, that's very close. That's up and personal. So I just, I love the project. I want it to work, but the residents are saying, the majority of them are saying no. So I took note of everybody that came up and spoke and numbered them and how many was against and how many was for it. And I really read every single email that I received, and wasn't able to return all the calls, but based on the people in the community, I think the majority does not want this. And that's the only reason that I'm going against it, because I really think it's a great project. For me, it fits on the beach. It fits fine, but some of those it does not. So I would say no as well tonight.
Very good. Pardon me. Further commission discussion. Commissioner McMahon?
This has been a very difficult decision. I think it's probably, as some of the new commissioners, probably one of the toughest decisions we make. A lot of the residents that came up here tonight, I respect a lot. And I understand where they're coming from. I also understand that this is not a high-density unit. This is a 28-unit building. The value that this will bring to our city is pretty substantial. These units they're not rentals. They're not 300 or 400 rentals. They're 28 units. The design, my personal opinion, I think everybody that's even opposed to the building said the design was beautiful. I mean, it is an iconic building. It is set further back. I hear phone calls all the time about the Koi project on Atlantic Boulevard, and how did that get approved? Why did that get approved? That sits literally on Atlantic Boulevard. I don't think this building will have that feel. I think this building will sit back. I think the glass, the round is beautiful. The parking spots that they're going to provide for public parking is much needed. The crosswalk they'll provide is much needed. The park improvements are much needed. We just approved a GEO bond of $180 million to make major improvements to several parks in our city, major roadways, things like that. If we have a developer willing to, pony up and remodel a park, I think that brings great value to our community. The 28 units, they're high-end units. This is going to bring money to our city. This is going to keep our taxes stable, I truly believe. The cubic feet, if you look at the 1.5 million cubic feet is what the building uses. 1.75 is what it's approved for. So yes, it's not, you could build the square building with what they're proposing. It's actually a smaller building. It's not as big as what can currently be allowed in that zoning. They brought the height down. The pictures that they showed were the first plans that went to the Planning and Zoning Board. I think the new plans are beautiful. They're really neat. I think the round buildings, it is modern. The buildings that Vice Mayor talked about just to the north of it are within 50 feet of the height of this building, and there's 3 of them. They also have a lot there that has no height restriction at all. At some point, Tiffany Gardens could build on if they chose to. I don't know if they will, but they could if they wanted to. So that's my stance on this project. Thank you.
Very good. For the commission discussion. Commissioner McGee.
So I'm going over more of my notes and thinking back on conversations I've had, and honestly, this has been a conversation probably weekly since the first week I took office, with one side or another, anywhere it goes. And I received multiple emails, multiple phone calls, multiple outreach, multiple discussion. And one thing that was made this decision harder than it is, and trust me, I've lost many a sleepless night trying to contemplate this, is the amount of misinformation that was out there. The majority of the emails that I received against the project all referenced the 2017 plan. And when I first met with the developers, that was the first thing I think I said to them, was that this 2017 plan was too big, it was too dense. And then they came back with the new plan. And I'm listening to the different arguments on it. The traffic is, since the density is equal, the traffic's equal. The volume's less, the height's more. That's sort of an aesthetic thing. The benefit to the park that really benefits not just, in my opinion, not just the neighborhood, but all of District 1, all of Pompano Beach, is a big thing. Someone here said the parking is currently impossible, and they're adding parking. Again, compatibility is, again, an aesthetic. It's do we want to continue doing, like they said, the height was set in 1970s. And in the 1970s, we built a whole bunch of cereal box buildings all up and down the beach. And where are we now with Pompano? Where are we looking to be with our innovation district, with our casino redevelopment, with the Atlantic corridor, with the future of Pompano? There's definitely things that, I want to make sure is covered in the developer agreement that we watch out for. I think the scenic highway park designation is super important, and retaining, and I think that's something that to really work closely with Parks and Rec and with the community and the preservation and Pompano Proud groups to make sure that we don't jeopardize that at all. But if one of the designations for that is iconic, this is an iconic building. It's architecturally interesting. As far as the usages for the park, I know I've spoken with the surf camp that goes there and some of the other neighborhood. I don't know exactly what amenities. I've heard everything from exercise equipment to the pavilion extension to maybe a splash pad. And after the popularity of the one in on the Great Lawn, there's, I think, a lot of wiggle room in the details that could be hashed out. And so, and it was this is, again, I tried to keep myself talking to every single view, every single person who had an opinion, who wanted to meet and talk for hours at times about what this was. And that's where I look at this and I say, building are we sticking with who we were, known as Pompano for decades? I've lived here all my life. No one ever wanted to build here. Or are we looking towards the future? And I'm going to support this project with a look towards the future.
Very good. Further commission discussion? Seeing none, ask the leader, call the roll.
Commissioner Eaton?
Yes.
Commissioner McGee?
Yes.
Commissioner McMahon?
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins?
No.
Vice Mayor Moss?
Yes.
Mayor Harden?
No. That ends our quasi-judicial proceedings. We're going to take a 10-minute recess.